I transmigrated into the primitive era, where strength decided who ruled and which man women wanted as the father of their children. By the time I became king, every busty girl around me wanted to have my babies. One full moon night, one of the fiercest queens in my alliance ended up hanging upside down in my hunting trap. She was gorgeous, furious, and upside down. That was a bad combination for my judgment. She ordered me to cut her loose, so I caught her heel and tickled it once. A tiny squeak escaped her. Her face went red, and she promised to kick my teeth out just as her hunters appeared. I blocked their view, cut the vine, caught her, and set her upright before the humiliation went public. Still red-faced, she shoved me away, then stayed close enough to whisper another threat. This world had one brutal rule. Weak men became prey, strong men became fathers. I was Rylan Wilder, and I had arrived as prey. So, how did a 24-year-old city guy go from prey to a tribe, a queen, and women fighting over him? Go back to my first morning beside a primitive river, 12 hours before the system paid me. One moment, I carried shopping bags through a modern city. The next, I woke beside muddy water under strange trees. Hide-clad strangers stepped from the brush. I mistook them for performers. I raised both hands. "Can you tell me where I am?" A sharpened bone flew past my ear. It missed by less than an inch. A little lower, and the future baby's part needed major revisions. Another hunter drove a spear across my side. The stone tip opened my shirt and skin in one pass. That answered the costume question. I ran. I had been a decent runner back home, so I pulled ahead for 3 glorious seconds. Then, a private survival interface called the Frontier System spoke inside my head. Survive for 12 hours. Reward, 1 attribute point and a survival pack. Stay alive until the timer ended, and I received tools. 1 hunter blocked the river while 2 cut through the trees, so I stopped asking polite questions and ran for the narrowest opening. A bone club spun toward my head. Movies had taught me to lean backward and look cool. Movies lied. The club caught my temple, and the world switched off. 12 hours later, I woke tied to a wooden post inside their camp. My side had crusted with blood, but the timer had expired while I was still alive. That technicality saved me. The Frontier System translated their speech and loaded survival basics plus a rough map. Then it gave me medicine, 1 attribute point, and a black-bladed weapon called the Rift Cleaver Axe. Useful rewards. Terrible delivery service. A broad-shouldered hunter named Tucker Ridgway controlled the camp. He was 27, powerful, and used to being obeyed. Tucker pointed at my wound. "He bleeds easily. Keep his things. Kill him if he causes trouble." Then a campwoman looked me over. "The fiercest man should father the strongest children. If this stranger becomes strong, I want his child." I had understood them for 10 seconds, and my dating prospects were already public business. Strength-controlled food, safety, authority, and desire. Begging would put me back on the menu. So I spent my single point on strength. Heat surged through my arms. I gripped the rift cleaver and snapped both ropes. The camp jumped back. Tucker did not. The human wall raised his stone club. I rested the axe on my shoulder. "You captured the wrong man. Heaven sent me here to rule this land." My evidence was 1 impossible axe and pure audacity. Tucker lifted his club. A god would not bleed. I smiled. A smart man would stop checking. The Frontier System attached a penalty to my bluff. Subdue the camp and establish authority. Failure will revoke the Rift Cleaver Axe. Tucker charged. His club came down hard enough to crack the post behind me. I stepped aside and swung once. The Rift Cleaver cut his stone-headed weapon in half. Broken stone hit the dirt between Tucker's feet. Around him, the other hunters lowered their spears, and the woman discussing my future children leaned forward. Beautiful. The right audience had seen the wrong weapon break. Tucker threw the handle aside and ordered everyone forward. The whole camp rushed me. Primitive people had invented gang fights before pants. 1 spear scraped my shoulder. I knocked another hunter back with the axe handle and kicked a third into the firewood. I raised the blade. "Come closer. I may fall, but I'll take half of you with me." The nearest hunter froze. Then the entire group scattered between the huts. For 1 magnificent heartbeat, I thought my threat had worked. The Frontier System disagreed. Emergency mission accepted. Drive off the saber-tooth. My consent had apparently stayed in the modern world. A growl rolled across my back. I turned and found a saber-tooth 10 feet away, taller than my chest, with fangs hanging past its jaw. The hunters had been running from the animal behind me. It lunged. I swung too early, and 1 paw threw me across the dirt. I could not beat it in open ground. The camp's bonfire burned behind the huts, and the beast had already flinched from flying embers. So I ran straight through the settlement. The saber-tooth followed while the hunters watched their new god sprint past at full panic. Public confidence. Private cardio. I reached the fire, grabbed a burning branch, and shoved the flames toward its face. The beast recoiled, then circled for another opening. Then a roar exploded beyond the far trees. The ground trembled. The saber-tooth flattened its ears and bolted. Whatever roared had scared the animal that nearly killed me. Great, tutorial boss cleared. Something worse waited. The system gave me 2 points. I split them between strength and agility, then returned with the axe on my shoulder. Tucker stood beside his broken weapon. The saber-tooth fled. I shrugged. Just a frightened kitty with confidence problems. Nobody laughed. They believed me. One hunter lowered his spear. Another brought water without being ordered. A woman pulled a child behind her, then slowly let the child look at me. Tucker's jaw tightened. He stepped aside, and the hunters behind him did the same. I used a little medicine on my ribs and side, then hid the remaining ointment. Power looks less impressive when everyone can count the bandages. The same woman from earlier squeezed my arm. "You survived the great cat! You are fierce!" She smiled with enough intention to make the local mating rule painfully clear. My title fantasy had officially left the planning stage. Tucker planted himself between us while the woman kept smiling around his shoulder. Surviving one beast does not make him leader. I pointed the rift cleaver toward his broken club. Good thing that wasn't my only argument. A hunter near the fire lifted the half of Tucker's weapon I had cut. Another pointed toward the saber-tooth tracks ending at the bonfire. No one moved to back Tucker. I stepped close enough that only he could hear me clearly. "You can challenge me again. This time, nobody runs until one of us stays down." Tucker looked at my bleeding side. Then he looked at the axe, the burning branch, and the forest where the saber-tooth had vanished. His hand opened. Tucker lowered his eyes. "The camp needs food first." I let Tucker keep that scrap of pride. I needed a commander more than a corpse. The frontier system marked the authority mission complete. Tucker's refusal to fight again was proof enough. Several hunters lowered their weapons completely. One woman brought cloth for my ribs. Another dragged Tucker's broken club away from the center of camp. Smart man, slow learner, but smart. The frontier system immediately gave me a harder mission. Civilization mission. Build permanent homes and form a tribe of 50 people within 18 days. A population counter appeared. Current population, 15 of 50. I looked around the camp. 3 rough shelters leaned around one dying fire. Meat scraps sat uncovered. Nobody guarded the river path. The system wanted me to turn this camp into a permanent tribe. 14 people watched me. Some were afraid. Some wanted food. One woman wanted children. Tucker kept glancing at his broken club, but he had stopped reaching for it. The youngest adult hunter stood near the edge. He was quick, observant, and avoiding my eyes because he remembered chasing me beside the river. His name would come soon enough. For now, I had an axe, a wounded body, 14 suspicious strangers, and 18 days to find 35 more people. I knew what being hunted felt like. If these people chose me, I was not leaving them as prey. The larger roar still waited beyond the trees. Tucker finally asked the question everyone else was avoiding. "Where will you find 35 people?" I answered. "Tucker, I won't find them one at a time. Other groups already have people. We build something worth joining, then we make them choose us." A hunter near the huts muttered that adding strangers would only bring more mouths and more knives. The campwoman answered him first. "More strong hunters bring more meat." Tucker crossed his arms. "People follow strength and food." "We have little food," I told Tucker. "Then that is the first problem we fix. We find land, control the food around it, and build homes people want to enter." The woman smiled at the word homes. I saw where that was going and refused to make eye contact. One man who had chased me shifted toward the trees the moment I looked at him. I pointed at him. "Anyone who hunted me this morning can pay the debt by helping tomorrow. Run from the work, and Tucker can decide what happens." Tucker straightened. I had given his old authority a place inside my command. The nervous hunter stepped back toward the fire. Nobody else tried to leave. We needed safer land, dependable food, and neighboring clans. I also could not let Tucker see how hard breathing still hurt. The rough map confirmed that the open riverbank left us exposed. Higher ground had to come first. Enough planning, somebody had to move. I lifted the axe and gave the camp its first real order. "Eat, rest." At sunrise, we find a place worth defending. Tucker watched me for a long moment. Then he turned and repeated the order to the others. The man who had bound me was now carrying my command through the camp. The frontier system still showed 15 of 50. Surviving alone had been the easy mission. Now I had to turn the people who hunted me into a tribe. Then I had to absorb other clans before the 18-day clock ran out. That night, hunger pulled me back toward the abandoned kill site outside camp. I had survived captivity, a gang attack, and a saber-tooth. I was still starving. Rude. The hunters had dropped a half-butchered animal when the larger roar scattered them. I recovered the meat, cut extra strips for the camp, and started back before anything else smelled dinner. Then the ground disappeared under one foot. I dropped into a muddy hollow deeper than my knee. At first, I thought I had found a pit. Broken roots curved around the hollow. Another identical depression waited several yards ahead. It was a footprint, 5 broad toe marks pressed into the earth beneath me. The stride continued between broken trees, each print large enough to hold a sleeping man. The saber-tooth had run from something. Now I knew the forest also contained something big enough to leave holes in the ground by walking. Excellent neighborhood. Very affordable. Minor monster problem. I carried the meat home and slept beside the fire with the rift cleaver across my chest. The next morning, the camp nearly fought itself apart over breakfast. 2 hunters grabbed the same strip. A third shoved between them. Tucker stepped forward like he planned to solve hunger by breaking somebody's jaw. I buried the axe blade in the chopping block. The crack stopped every hand. Hunters eat first, I told them. They bring back the next meal. Children and injured people eat next. Anyone who starts a fight eats last. Tucker studied me, then released the man he had grabbed. One rule, one visible consequence. Civilization had officially begun with meat and threats. The youngest adult hunter kept avoiding my eyes. His name was Colby Rivers. He was 19, quick on his feet, and smart enough to remember that he had helped chase me beside the river. Colby lowered his head. "Will you kill me after we eat?" I tossed him a piece of meat. "Guide me well, and I'll forget how annoying you were." His shoulders loosened. Good. Fear had stopped making him useless. I told the camp we needed a permanent home before the 18-day deadline ate us alive. A fearless woman pushed through the group and stopped close enough to make the point personal. Her name was Emery Westfall. She was 23, strong through the shoulders, and clearly unfamiliar with hesitation. Emery tilted her head. "What is a home?" I pointed east. "A protected place near water and food. We build there, sleep without running, and raise the next generation safely. Once people chose to stand with me, I would not let monsters keep treating them as prey." Emery's face lit up. Then she wrapped both arms around me and announced, "Good! I'll live in your home and give you strong children." The entire camp heard her. I had meant roofs. She had skipped straight to the population plan. Tucker looked at me as if this was another divine technique. I refused to explain modern dating because my record back home did not support expert testimony. Colby saved me by pointing east. He knew a broad river delta beside the sea. The ground rose behind it, fish filled the water, and trees covered the slopes. The place had water, food, and defensible high ground. Then Colby added, "The cows there kill hunters." I almost laughed. "Cows?" He nodded with complete seriousness. "Look, I came from a world where cows appeared on milk cartons. I heard free meat with legs." We traveled east that morning. Emery stayed near me. Tucker kept the hunters spread out. Colby slowed whenever the forest went quiet. Then one of the trees moved. A black horn pushed through the leaves. A shoulder followed, taller than I was. The creature stepped into the open, and the ground shook under its weight. The frontier system identified them as ironhorn bulls, giant herd animals with plated hides. Their hides looked plated. Their horns curved forward like stone spears. More bodies moved behind the first until the forest itself seemed crowded. Colby whispered, "Those are the cows." I stared at him. "Your language has failed both of us." The river delta beyond them was perfect. Fresh water cut through rich ground. The sea opened to the south. A steep mountain guarded the western side. The future capital sat directly behind several tons of angry beef. I told the others to stay hidden while I inspected the herd. Tucker frowned. "You will go alone?" I told Tucker. "Of course. A king leads from the front." Privately, I was praying the cows respected political office. I moved along the tree line and threw a stone at the nearest bull. It struck the animal's horn. The bull turned. So did every other bull in the clearing. I had wanted one reaction. I received the premium family package. The herd charged. I sprinted toward the mountain while trunks cracked behind me. From the ridge, my people shouted as if I had volunteered to sacrifice myself for them. Very touching. Completely inaccurate. One bull caught the edge of my coat with a horn. I twisted free and reached the rocks. Another slammed into the mountain hard enough to shower me with stone. I climbed while the herd milled below, snorting and striking the slope. From the summit, I finally saw the whole eastern delta. The land could hold homes, fields, animals, and far more than 50 people. That mountain gave us a wall. The river and sea gave us food. If I took this place, I could build something larger than a desperate camp. First, I had to evict the landlords. When the herd moved away, I climbed down and returned to the others. Tucker was halfway up a tree, searching the branches below for my rift cleaver. I threw the axe into the dirt beside him. He nearly fell. "Looking for this?" I asked. Tucker climbed down without looking at anyone. "I thought the bulls killed you." I told Tucker, "Reasonable mistake. Do it again, and I start charging rent on my possessions." Then I pointed toward the delta. "We return in 3 days. By then, you'll have weapons that can kill those bulls." The camp stared at the herd, then at me. They looked at me like I had promised to punch the moon. In 3 days, either the bulls died or my new authority did. Back at camp, I cut a young tree and split it into long poles. I hardened the points over heat and threw one into a trunk. My finished spear buried itself deeper than any bone dart. The frontier system awarded technology progress. More importantly, Tucker stopped looking at the weapon like firewood. The camp's heaviest and fastest hunters rushed me together. I slipped past the heavy swing, turned around the second man, and touched the blunt spear point to his ribs. Strength helps, I told them. Accuracy decides where it lands. We built a target from bark and practiced until the ground looked like a failed porcupine. Most throws missed. Tucker's first spear flew sideways. It nearly promoted a tree to tribal chief. Then, one shaft struck the center. The thrower was Bowen Harker, a quiet 24-year-old hunter who had barely spoken all morning. I handed Bowen 2 finished spears. You train the others, I told him. Bowen's back straightened. Tucker looked offended for exactly 1 second, then ordered everyone to copy Bowen's stance. Before lunch, the brush exploded. A thick-bodied beast burst into camp, tusks low and eyes wild. It charged the nearest woman. I shouted for the hunters to spread instead of crowding it. Bowen moved first. His spear entered through the beast's open mouth and turned its head. Colby climbed a low branch, waited for the pass, and drove his spear down from above. The animal kept coming. I met it from the side and buried the rift cleaver behind its shoulder. It dropped hard enough to shake dust from the leaves. The camp did not cheer immediately. They looked from the dead beast to Bowen's spear, then to the formation that had kept everyone alive. I pointed at Bowen. Best throw of the hunt. Learn from him. Then I pointed at Colby. Good timing. Keep using your eyes before your mouth. Colby grinned. Bowen received the first public specialist role. Tucker began dividing people without waiting for me to repeat the order. Tucker immediately used the same formation to divide the next guard shift. That evening, Emery brought me a slab of raw meat. The camp's old flame had died while everyone hid from the saber-tooth. They had depended on natural fire and had no idea how to make more. I spun a dry stick against wood until smoke appeared, fed the ember grass, and breathed one flame into life. The whole camp backed away. Tucker whispered, "He creates the sun." I corrected Tucker. "Small sun, do not hug it." The frontier system awarded 10 technology points. It also unlocked a way to recognize useful civilization relics later. For now, cooked meat was enough. The smell pulled everyone close, and Emery watched me like fire had improved my marriage application. Colby examined the beast we had killed. He found milk and tracks leading into brush. It had young, he told me. The frontier system offered a domestication mission. I sent Colby and Emery to bring the cubs back alive. Then I twisted grass into rope, lashed wooden rails together, and built a pen before they returned. The moment it stood, half the camp rushed inside. A woman claimed the corner nearest my sleeping place. 2 hunters argued over the dry side. Tucker stepped through the gate and inspected the floor like he had just inherited a palace. Emery returned carrying a squealing cub and stared at the crowd. "Why are they in our home?" she asked. There it was again. Every invention had become a marriage proposal. I rubbed both hands over my face. "This belongs to the pigs." Tucker looked personally betrayed. "The pigs receive the strongest house?" I told Tucker, "The pigs become food without running away. You can leave whenever you want. Most days." That cleared the pen quickly. I gave them one rule: keep the cubs alive, let them breed, and future meals stop running away. When Emery and Colby placed the cubs inside, the mission completed. The reward was a pouch of salt and a recipe for fried clams. I had asked the system for civilization. It kept trying to turn me into a restaurant owner. Late that night, I sat with Colby beside the fire and asked where we could find 35 more people. Before he answered, Colby glanced at the scar on my side. "You truly forgive the river attack?" I answered Colby. "Guide me away from the next flying bone, and the debt is paid." Colby nodded once, moved closer to the fire, and started naming nearby clans. A sharp-tongued organizer named Nola Hayward joined us with dried meat. She was 25, fast with her hands, and even faster at noticing when somebody lied. Colby described 3 nearby groups. The Sunshore clan lived around coconut trees and usually traded before fighting. Brackwater clan lived near the southern water and fought over almost everything. Iron Peak clan controlled the strongest warriors and scared the other groups into avoiding their territory. I chose Sunshore as our first recruitment target. Nola tapped the meat against her palm. "Peaceful people still need a reason to follow you," I told Nola. "Then we'll bring one. A mountain of bull meat should start the conversation." Her smile sharpened. Nola clearly enjoyed plans that gave other people fewer options. Then Emery came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. "Rylan, come with me. I found something exciting." Nola raised one eyebrow. Colby suddenly found the fire fascinating. I grabbed Colby's arm and stood. "Excellent. My scout and I were just leaving for an urgent strategic walk." Emery laughed while I dragged him into the dark. The title promise was moving beautifully. My survival instincts remained unconvinced. Sunshore looked like the safest path to 50 people. The Brackwater fighters could wait. Iron Peak was far above our weight. But before I could recruit anyone, I had 3 days to kill the ironhorn herd and take the land they owned. The next morning, Colby led me south to inspect the violent Brackwater clan before the bull hunt. We stayed above the shoreline and watched more than 30 people fight over one fat, flightless bird. 2 men pulled opposite wings. A woman kicked one of them into the water. Their leader solved nothing because he was busy grabbing the bird's leg. One fighter escaped with a chunk of meat. 3 others abandoned the bird and chased him. Nobody guarded the shoreline. Nobody watched the trees. Their numbers were impressive. Their discipline was a public emergency. Colby whispered, "They fight like this often." I wanted their numbers. I also wanted to survive meeting them. Brackwater was larger than my camp and too divided to absorb with promises alone. If I approached them before taking the eastern land, they would see 15 hungry people and 1 ambitious idiot with an axe. So I backed away. I told Colby, "We get the bulls first. Meat and weapons will make our invitation harder to laugh at." That choice left us 1 day to finish the arsenal. Back at camp, Bowen drilled the throwers while Tucker organized cutting, hauling, and guard shifts. The rival who had tied me to a post was already acting like a field commander. I hated how useful he was. He hated how much he enjoyed being useful. Healthy male friendship, basically. I assigned the women to stone heads because steady hands mattered more than brute force. Emery produced the first clean double-edged blade. The Frontier system unlocked talent recognition. Emery tested her edge against old hide. It cut cleanly where 3 rough tools had only scraped, and the women copied her angle. Bowen threw through a hanging grass ring twice. Tucker saw 2 hunters reaching for the same bundle, split them into teams, and killed the argument. The system confirmed what the camp had just seen. Emery was our toolmaker, Bowen our best thrower, and Tucker a natural commander. By sunset, Emery had shaped more than half our improved heads. Her palms were scraped raw, but she kept reaching for another stone. I caught her wrist. "You're done," I told her. Emery smiled. "Are you worried about my hands or thinking about our future children again?" Several women turned toward me at once. Nola looked from Emery's hands to my face. "Careful, King. You're staring like the tool isn't the sharpest thing here," I told Nola. "I was evaluating craftsmanship." Nola nodded slowly. "Of course you were." In my defense, Emery had made an excellent spearhead. The argument had multiple strengths. I wrapped her palms, ordered another woman to take over, and counted our stock. 30 improved weapons. Look, 30 weapons sounded respectable until I remembered the herd had more bodies than we had good throws. The last advantage grew beside camp as a cluster of black leaves. The Frontier system identified their sap as a natural paralytic. It also warned that the paste could enter through any open cut. Nola held up her scraped finger. "So your secret weapon is poisonous salad?" I warned Nola. "Touch it with that hand and you'll sleep through the battle." She passed the mortar to somebody else immediately. The women crushed the leaves and coated each stone point. The strongest hunters rested. Tucker placed Bowen with the best throwers and kept the remaining spears bundled by count. The plan had 4 parts: high ground, poison tips, 3 wounded bulls as bait, and 1 dead leader. We had 30 improved weapons, 15 people, and no replacement supply if the first throws failed. I made Tucker count every spear allowed. Bowen assigned the best throwers to the narrow side of the ridge. Emery kept the coated points wrapped until the last moment so nobody brushed one by accident. Every part of the plan was ready: people, poison, spears, and terrain. The question was whether the herd would cooperate. At dawn, we reached the mountain above the eastern river delta. The women and injured workers stayed behind a rock shelf with spare spears. Bowen's throwers spread along the ridge. Tucker held the center. Colby watched the forest line and signaled herd movement. I went downhill alone. Tucker caught my arm. "If you die, who leads?" I answered Tucker. "You!" His grip tightened. Then I grinned. "So keep me alive. I don't trust your interior design." Tucker released me with a disgusted look. The tension broke for one breath. Then the first ironhorn bull stepped between the trees. I walked into the open and struck the rift cleaver against a rock. The sound carried across the valley. "Come on," I shouted. "I promised my people breakfast." Publicly, I looked fearless. Privately, my body was preparing to resign. 3 bulls broke from the herd and charged. I waited until their horns filled my vision, then ran toward the narrow slope beneath the ridge. The first poisoned spear hit a shoulder joint. The bull jerked toward the thrower, exposing its softer neck to the opposite ridge. Bowen's shaft entered beneath the second bull's jaw. That animal crashed into the first and blocked the narrow path for several seconds. Tucker used the opening. "Third bull, front leg, throw together." 4 spears struck almost at once. The third bull stumbled, but it kept climbing through the bodies ahead. The paralytic worked slower than I wanted. Each animal had enough mass to keep moving while the poison spread. Positioning still decided every second. One horn caught the ground near my heel. I jumped, landed badly, and started sliding down loose stone. Tucker dropped from the ridge, grabbed my forearm, and hauled me sideways before the bull crushed both of us. "You said keep you alive," he barked. I told Tucker, "Excellent listening." Then Tucker turned to the hunters and took command. "Left side, hold! Bowen, take the mouth! Save the center spears!" People moved before panic could spread. The first bull collapsed on its front legs. Another rolled against a boulder. Only the third remained standing, wounded and furious. Tucker drove a spare spear behind its knee. Bowen hit the mouth again. The third bull finally dropped with its horn buried in the slope. 3 targets, 3 bodies down. The plan had paid exactly once. A cheer started above us. I cut it off. The trees were moving. Roughly 20 more bulls entered the valley. We had 28 usable spears left. A hunter raised his arm to throw. I knocked the point down. Save it. Killing the herd one body at a time empties our hands first. Colby pointed toward the rear. The bull king came through the forest. It stood taller than the others and carried scars across its plated hide. Its horns were thick enough to split a tree. Heat rolled from its nostrils each time it breathed. The herd did not rush us. They spread around the wounded 3 and watched the ridge. I held one hand up. Every thrower waited. The bull king looked from our high ground to the wounded animals, then paced sideways until it found the mountain's weakest face. That was the first sign the boss understood the trap. I had expected rage. It gave me patience. Then the bull king lowered its head and slammed into the mountain. Stone cracked beneath my feet. The herd followed. 20 ironhorn bodies struck the slope in waves. The ridge shook. Spears rolled toward the edge. Hunters dropped flat and grabbed roots. One impact split the ledge beneath Bowen. Tucker pulled him back by the belt. Another strike knocked 2 wrapped spear bundles down toward the herd. Emery and another woman caught the last bundle together before it slid over. The bull king had found the one target my poison could not paralyze. The mountain. A section of the ridge tore away. Emery lost her footing behind the rock shelf and fell with the collapsing stone. I jumped after her. I caught her around the waist before she struck the lower ledge. We hit together, rolled through dust, and stopped on the exposed slope below the safe position. Above us, Tucker shouted for the others to spread. Bowen kept the remaining throwers firing at joints and eyes. The supply team pushed spare spears down instead of fleeing. The plan had broken. My people kept fighting. Then the bull king climbed through the collapse. It opened its mouth. A blast of fire and scorching air tore across the slope, blackening grass and forcing everyone apart. Colby had called these things cows. I intended to complain if we survived. The boss struck me with one horn and threw me into broken stone. My ribs screamed. The rift cleaver left my hand. The bull king turned toward the axe as if it understood what had wounded its herd. Then it planted one hoof on the handle and forced me to choose between the weapon and the people behind it. One of Tucker's strongest warriors drove a spear into the animal's flank. The bull king kicked him across the slope. Duncan Dunbar, Tucker's quickest spear fighter, dragged the wounded man clear and took a horn scrape across his own thigh. The bull king turned toward the injured men. Tucker stepped into its path and slapped his spear against the plated nose. The spear glanced off the armor and stole 1 second. Bowen used it to drive a shaft into the soft edge beneath its eye. The boss snapped toward him. Tucker rolled clear and shouted for every fighter to abandon the armor. Same wound, nothing else. I grabbed the rift cleaver and attacked its wounded flank. My axe opened the gap around the heavy hunter's spear. Bowen hit the same point from above. Duncan threw while dragging the wounded man with his other arm. The supply team pushed fresh shafts down the slope as fast as hands could catch them. Stone points entered one wound from 3 directions. The bull king staggered. I climbed onto its shoulder, buried the rift cleaver deeper, and twisted with everything the frontier system had given me. The animal crashed onto its side. Dust rolled over the lower slope. Its fire died in its throat, and the nearest bull stopped advancing. For 1 second, the valley went silent. Then my people cheered. Tucker raised his broken spear. Bowen dropped to one knee. Emery reached me through the dust and grabbed my arm. We had done it. Except the herd did not run. Every remaining bull stood in place. Their heads stayed low. Their eyes remained fixed on their king. I looked back at the body beneath me. One massive leg moved. The bull king rose. Cheers died, one voice at a time as people realized the same thing at different speeds. It shook me off, ripped a spear from its own wound with its teeth, and caught the shaft between its jaws. I tried to stand, my left leg folded. The bull king snapped its head forward. The spear flew straight at my chest. Emery stepped between us. The stone point drove through her side and threw her against me. I caught her before she hit the ground. No one joked. No one moved for one long heartbeat. Emery had trusted me when I promised a home. I had let the monster turn her into prey. Blood spread beneath my hand. Her fingers closed weakly around my wrist. "You still owe me that home!" Then her grip slipped. The frontier system flashed a warning across my vision. Rift Cleaver sealed output available. Forced release will overload the user's body. The choice was simple. Hold back and watch the Bull King finish my people, or pay with whatever my body had left. I laid Emery behind a rock and stood. Tucker reached for me. "Rylan, you can barely walk," I told Tucker. "Then keep everyone away from the axe." I forced the sealed output open. The black blade changed in my hands. Pale lines ran through the metal as the Rift Cleaver awakened into its sealed form. World Cleaver Axe. Power hit my arms hard enough to tear old wounds open. My vision narrowed. The Bull King charged through the dust. I met it head-on. I brought World Cleaver down between its horns and split through the armored body in one continuous strike. The Bull King hit the ground behind me and did not rise again. Every remaining bull stopped. I pulled the axe free, faced the remaining bulls, and shouted until blood filled my mouth. "Your king is dead. Come closer." None of them did. The first bull backed away, then another turned. Within seconds, the herd broke and thundered into the eastern forest. The retreat changed the whole valley. Hunters who had spent their lives hiding from the herd stood in the open and watched it run from us. Bowen lowered his spear with both hands shaking. Tucker looked from the dead king to me and stopped arguing about who led. Then Emery made a weak sound behind me, and the triumph lost its shine. Tucker dropped beside her. Bowen and Duncan pulled the wounded warrior away from the slope. The women tore open the medicine wrap while Colby kept pressure on Emery's wound. We owned the land. We had meat for months. The strongest monster in the herd lay dead at my feet. Emery lay bleeding behind me. Then the overload hit. Pain crushed the air from my lungs. I coughed blood onto the black blade and fell to one knee. I ordered, "Use the medicine on Emery first." The women shouted my name. My vision tilted. My strength disappeared so quickly that the axe felt heavier than the bull. The last thing I saw was Tucker catching the weapon before it struck the stone. He shouted for the others to carry Emery first. Good. He had understood the only order that mattered. Then I blacked out. I thought killing the Bull King made me look untouchable. 4 days later, I still could not stand. A queen with twice my people was already walking toward my camp. 4 days after I killed the Bull King, I woke inside a wooden shelter I had never seen. My first attempt to sit up ended immediately. Pain folded me back onto the bedding, and the frontier system showed the damage in one cheerful line. 11 days remaining. Current population, 15 of 50. 4 days had vanished while I was unconscious. The system had apparently watched me sleep and kept the clock running. Very supportive. Tucker Ridgway pushed through the doorway before I could try again. The former man who tied me to a post now looked exhausted from keeping my settlement alive. I grabbed his wrist. "Emery?" Tucker answered immediately. "Alive. The medicine stopped the bleeding. She wakes, eats, and insults anyone who tells her to rest." A shadow moved behind him. Nola supported Emery at the doorway. Emery looked pale beneath fresh bandages, but she was awake. Emery reached across the bedding and touched my wrist. "You ordered medicine for me first. You took the spear first," I answered. Emery held my eyes for a moment, then nodded. Nola guided her back before either of us tried something stupid. Duncan had survived his thigh wound. Tucker's heavy hunter had also lived. Several people could barely work, and I could not stand without seeing white. The land was ours. The meat could feed us for months. Our victory had made us look rich at the exact moment we were easiest to kill. Then Tucker gave me the worst news. "Sunshore heard about the bulls," he told me. "Their queen may come." Sunshore had nearly twice our people. If their queen saw 15 exhausted survivors and one king shaped like a broken chair, my recruitment plan was cooked. I couldn't fight, so I had to make 15 battered people look like an army. Inside the medicine pouch, one useful dose remained. I closed it. That ointment could keep me standing later or save another person. Spending it to make my ribs complain less would have been luxury medicine, and I was currently living in a hut, so I gave Tucker one order at a time. The injured stayed out of sight. The strongest workers finished the houses. Duncan recovered the Bull King's hide, skull, horns, and the cleanest bones. Colby watched the eastern trail and every stranger near our camp. Nobody received the entire plan. Tucker crossed his arms. "And what will you do?" I adjusted the blanket over my useless legs. "Look terrifying." He stared at me. I told Tucker, "Try to keep your expectations realistic." Then I asked him to send Nola Hayward inside alone. Nola entered my shelter, pushed the door covering closed, and looked at the bedding. Then she loosened the hide strap over one shoulder. "So the king finally noticed me," she murmured. "I nearly re-injured myself trying to sit upright." "Keep your clothes on," I told her. "This is an envoy assignment." Nola retied the strap and looked genuinely offended. "You could have opened with that." In my defense, I had summoned our sharpest adult woman into a private hut while lying half-dressed under animal skins. Honestly, her conclusion was fair. I told Nola why she fit the job. Sunshore traded before fighting, and a woman could approach its queen without looking like an invading male challenger. Colby knew the route and could read danger before it reached them. Nola listened until I handed her several small strips of dried fish. She held them up. "This is our great gift. Let them laugh," I told her. "Then tell their queen we have more bull meat than her whole clan can carry." Nola's smile returned. She liked any plan that began with somebody underestimating her. At sunrise, Nola and Colby started the day-long route toward Sunshore. They later told me what happened near a bathing spring inside Sunshore territory. Hidden women surrounded them with spears. Colby lowered his weapon. Nola kept chewing one of the fish strips like getting captured had been scheduled. The guards dragged them before the queen who ruled the largest clan nearby. Her name was Tamsin Lockwood. She was 27. A braided hide whip circled one wrist while her hunters watched for one sign of weakness. Tamsin looked at the dried fish in Nola's hand. "Your king sent scraps?" A few Sunshore women laughed. Nola bit through the last strip. "No, he sent proof we can preserve food while yours spoils. The real gift is waiting at our settlement." Tamsin tapped the whip against her palm. "And what does your tiny settlement have that Sunshore needs?" Nola answered. "A mountain of ironhorn meat." The laughter stopped. Colby added that our people had killed the Bull King and taken the Eastern River Delta. He kept the claim plain. Nola supplied the disrespect. "You can call me a liar from that chair," she told Tamsin. "Or you can walk east and fail to carry home everything we offer." Tamsin rose. "Good." Nola's dare had worked. The following afternoon, Colby returned ahead of Sunshore and gave us the signal. Tucker dragged me outside. Duncan and several workers wrapped the Bull King's hide across my shoulders, then fixed the horned skull above my head. The thing weighed enough to make my ribs threaten immediate resignation. Tucker lowered me onto a wooden seat beside the fire. Behind me stood finished spears, penned boars, stacked hides, and the first walls of several houses. The mountain of meat did the rest. Bull carcasses covered an entire cleared slope. Smoke rose from drying racks. Workers carried strips larger than a child while wounded fighters hid beyond the brush. One bush shook when Tamsin approached. I hissed toward it. "If any of you bleed on my stage, I will personally put you back in bed." The shaking stopped. Tamsin entered with armed women on both sides. Her whip rested against one hip. She was gorgeous, confident, and looking at my settlement like she intended to find the trick underneath it. That combination was dangerous to my strategy and my common sense. Nola announced her. "Tamsin Lockwood, Queen of Sunshore." She came to see whether I exaggerated. Tamsin glanced at the carcasses. "You exaggerated very little." Her voice had lost the mockery. Then one of her warriors stepped toward the meat pile and hacked at a thick slab with a stone knife. The edge chipped. She tried again, her blade cracked in her hand. Tucker gave her the kind of smile normally seen right before a fight. The Sunshore warrior shoved him. "You used some trick to weaken it." Tucker shoved back. "Your knife is weak." Several spears rose. I could not stand fast enough to stop them, so I used the one thing that still moved properly. I threw the axe. The black blade crossed the clearing and cut through a hanging bull rib. It buried itself in the ground between Tucker and the Sunshore warrior. Both sides stopped. The cut rib dropped in two clean pieces. Tamsin's eyes moved from the broken stone knife to my axe. Her hand tightened once around the whip. When Tamsin spoke again, the laughter was gone. I leaned back beneath the bull skull. "Take the meat you can carry. If Sunshore joins me later, I'll teach your people to make better weapons." Tamsin walked closer. "You offer weapons before I agree to follow you?" "I offered the future version," I told her. "Today, you get lunch." Nola covered a smile. Then pain tore across my side. The axe throw had reopened the bull wound. Warm blood soaked through the wrap beneath my hide cloak. Tamsin's gaze dipped. Nola stepped directly between us and shoved a salted meat strip into Tamsin's hand. "Taste this first," Nola told her. "Our king becomes unbearable when people ignore his food." Tamsin looked at Nola, then bit the meat. She took a second bite. The salt worked. I used the distraction to press a folded hide against my side. Tamsin finished the strip and declined the weapon offer. "Sunshore does not kneel because a wounded stranger owns a sharp axe. We have strengths you have not seen." She had noticed something. I could not tell how much, so I gave her no explanation. "Then bring more people next time," I told her. "A secret is easier to respect after dinner." Tamsin studied me long enough to become annoying. Then she ordered her people to take only the meat they could carry and return home. Before leaving, she looked at Nola. "You speak well. Sunshore could use you." Nola moved beside my chair. "I already work for the man with the meat mountain." Tamsin's eyes shifted between us. "Then I hope he knows what he has." Nola waited until Sunshore disappeared into the trees. Then she lifted my cloak, saw the blood, and smacked my shoulder. I regretted existing. "Was that necessary?" I asked. Nola retied the bandage. "Was the axe throw necessary?" "It looked impressive. So did the queen." "Which one were you trying to impress?" I told Nola. "Whichever one is currently stopping the bleeding." She pulled the knot tighter. That answer had apparently failed. Tamsin left with meat, doubt, and a reason to spy on us. After the merger, one of her scouts told me what she had reported that night. She had seen houses, penned boars, controlled fire, advanced spears, very few visible people, and cleared paths that blocked a closer look. Tamsin whipped her once for returning with excuses, then sent the watchers back. A tiny clan should not have owned that much food or technology. At our camp that same evening, Colby entered my shelter with mud on his knees and several snapped twigs. "Sunshore watchers," Colby reported. "We tracked all of them." He had moved our workers, blocked the easiest paths, and kept every injured person outside their sight lines. The spies saw only what I wanted them to see. I handed him a strip of salted meat. "Good work." Colby looked disappointed. You promised useful rewards, I pointed east. Then earn the real one. Find the surviving herd without spooking it, and I'll make you a scout's blade from bullhorn. That restored the grin. Nola sat beside the door. Phase 2? I answered Nola. You already did your part. Let Tamsin wonder. I gave her nothing more. 2 days later, I could stand for short stretches without blacking out. Inside the storage shed, I inspected the black axe. The frontier system confirmed that the bull battle had awakened its sealed identity. World Cleaver Axe. The name was impressive. My ribs remembered the price. I kept the final ointment dose untouched. Then I carved bull bone into small gifts, shaped one horn into a whistle, and waited while Tucker finished the houses. He presented them before sunset. One wall leaned. A roof corner leaked. Tucker stood beside the structures like he had invented property ownership. A whole family can sleep inside each, he announced. I walked around the first house and pressed one post. The whole wall creaked. Tucker slapped my hand away. Do not test it like the Bull King. The frontier system credited the completed homes with technology progress. Our people cheered and started carrying bedding inside before Tucker finished bragging. Those crooked walls could now shelter the people I meant to recruit. Then Colby came running from the eastern trail. He stopped in front of me, breathing hard. I found the surviving herd. They're still together. Every conversation around us ended. I put the bullhorn whistle in Tucker's hand. When Sunshore returns, take the team east, I told him. Use this to move the lead bull and command our hunters. No one changes the route. No one chases a glory kill. Tucker closed his fist around the whistle. And if Sunshore sees us? Then the plan dies, I answered. So do not get seen. I gave Nola, Colby, Tucker, and the others only the piece each needed. The first performance had convinced Tamsin that my small tribe might be dangerous. The second had to make her depend on us. The next morning, a lookout spotted Tamsin returning with enough Sunshore people to empty my meat racks. Tucker and Colby slipped east before her group entered our clearing. Tamsin scanned the clearing for both men. She had seen them before. I distracted her with 40 portions of salted bull meat and a wooden house to inspect. Suspicion had to compete with lunch. Nola met the visitors beside our largest house and spread both arms. Welcome to the king's palace. The roof leaned slightly to the left. Tamsin looked at it, then at me. This is a palace? I told her. Temporary palace. My builders are still negotiating with straight lines. A flush touched Tamsin's face before she hid it. Tucker was far east and still would have felt that insult. Tamsin stepped inside. The finished walls blocked wind. A raised sleeping platform kept bedding off the ground. Smoke escaped through a roof gap that Tucker insisted was intentional. Her fingers brushed the wooden frame. Nola had told me Sunshore still slept beneath open shelters and palm roofs. Tamsin traced our solid frame a second time. Tamsin turned to Nola. Bring your skills to Sunshore. I'll give you people to command. Nola leaned against the doorway. Your people tried to arrest me beside a bathing spring. Rylan gave me meat and an audience. His recruiting method has better benefits. Tamsin's mouth curved. You defend him quickly, Nola replied. I defend useful investments. Both women looked at me. I had survived a bull king. This felt less safe. Tamsin walked around me once, slowly. Her whip hung loose from one hand. You sit often for a man who claims great strength, she observed. My wound tightened beneath the bullhide cloak. I smiled. I stand when something deserves the effort. Tamsin flicked her wrist. The whip looped around my forearm, crossed my chest, and pulled me against a support post before I could protect my ribs. Pain flashed behind my eyes. I kept smiling because Sunshore warriors were watching through the doorway. Tamsin stepped close. Does this deserve the effort? In my defense, she was gorgeous, angry, and holding a whip. I was enjoying this too much to think clearly. I caught the leather between two fingers. You came for food. Tying up the cook seemed short-sighted. Tamsin pulled once. A king should escape his own palace. I could have forced the issue and reopened everything. Instead, I leaned closer and lowered my voice. A queen should ask before putting ropes on a wounded man. Her eyes dropped to the hidden bandage for one brief second. Nola stepped through the doorway carrying a platter. She stopped. Tamsin had me pinned to a post. I was holding the whip. We were standing much too close for an innocent explanation. Nola looked at the meat, then at us. Should I come back after the alliance ceremony? Tamsin released the whip immediately. I rubbed my wrist. Bring the food. Save the judgment. Nola handed me the platter. I brought both. Outside, the feast began. Salt changed the whole mood. Sunshore women bit into smoky meat, stopped talking, then reached for second portions. Children followed the smell between the houses. Hunters who had arrived gripping spears ended up guarding their plates instead. One Sunshore child stared at the cooking fire until one of our hunters handed her a warm strip. Her mother tried to pull her back, then tasted the meat herself. Moments later, both were sitting beside our people. Tamsin tasted one piece and looked annoyed that it was excellent. I raised my own portion. Careful, Our dangerous secret is seasoning, she pointed the whip handle at me. Your dangerous secret is that mouth, you keep coming back to hear it. Nola coughed into her hand. Tamsin's face warmed, and the queen bit into the meat hard enough to end the exchange. The feast kept Sunshore at my settlement. Tucker and Colby later told me what happened east of Sunshore while we ate. Colby found the surviving ironhorn herd resting between two wooded slopes. Tucker's team stayed downwind and covered their faces with mud and bullhide. Colby struck the lead animal with a poisoned spear. Tucker sounded the horn whistle from the western gap. The wounded bull charged the noise. The herd followed its blood and panic. Whenever the animal started turning north, Colby appeared along the tree line and drove them west again. Tucker's hunters wounded only the lead animals and kept retreating towards Sunshore territory. The wounded lead bull kept charging towards Sunshore, and the rest of the herd stayed behind it. Back at the feast, a Sunshore scout burst through the trees without a spear. Her arm hung wrong at the shoulder. Blood covered one side of her face. Queen Tamsin, the scout gasped. The black bulls are inside our camp. Every Sunshore fighter dropped her food. Tamsin ran west before the scout finished speaking. Nola grabbed my cloak. You can barely hold yourself together. I pulled free. Then keep me together while we run. We followed the Sunshore group through the forest. By the time I reached their camp, the false flag had become a real disaster. Huts lay crushed beneath broken palms. A bull dragged an entire roof frame from one horn. Wounded people crawled toward the spring, while hunters threw stone spears that bounced from plated hides. Children were screaming. I had built the disaster. Their fear was real. Tamsin attacked the new herd leader before her warriors could surround it. Her whip snapped around one horn, and she tried to turn the animal away from the injured. The bull jerked its head. Tamsin left the ground. She flew over the broken shelter line and started dropping toward the hard ground. I forced my legs to move. I caught her around the waist, turned in the air, and hit the dirt on my injured side. The impact emptied my lungs. Tamsin landed across my chest, stunned but alive. For one stunned breath, neither of us moved. Then she looked down at me. You finally stood for something worthy, I coughed. You're heavier than your confidence suggested. Tamsin shoved herself upright and reached for the whip. I caught her wrist. Attack that herd again and it kills you. Let me handle the leader. Her people heard me. So did mine. Tucker's fighters entered from the eastern trees with their faces hidden beneath mud and torn hides. They attacked the wounded bulls from behind while Bowen's throwers took the soft joints. I stood beneath the bull king's cloak and raised the world cleaver axe. The new herd leader saw the horned skull above me. It stopped. The animal raised its nose toward the dead king's hide, backed away, and snorted toward the others. The nearest bulls hesitated with it. I struck the axe against stone. Your old king died under this blade, I shouted. Try me. My voice sounded stronger than my body felt. The lead bull turned first. The wounded animals followed. Tucker's team kept pressure on their rear until the herd thundered out of Sunshore territory. The camp went quiet except for crying and broken wood settling into dirt. Tamsin stared at the empty path. Her whip lowered. The plan had worked because I made their fear real. It felt filthy. I faced the displaced families. My settlement has finished houses, food, guards, and room for your wounded. Move there now. Decide what you think of me after your children are safe. Tamsin looked at the ruined shelters. Then she looked at the people I had just saved from the crisis I created. Her jaw tightened. One older Sunshore hunter refused to move. This is our home. A broken roof collapsed behind her and sent ash across the clearing. Tamsin caught the woman by both shoulders. Our people are the home. Carry the injured first. Everyone else follows Rylan's people. Sunshore obeyed. The injured moved first, and the rest followed my hunters east. By evening, every Sunshore survivor had reached our settlement. Nola placed families inside the new houses. Emery, still bandaged and unable to lift much, sat near the entrances and directed bedding, water, and food with frightening efficiency. One Sunshore mother tried to give her portion to a child. Emery split the meat and handed half back. Eat! Your child needs you standing! Tamsin watched her people sleep behind solid walls while our guards took the outer paths. The queen had lost her camp in one afternoon. My ugly houses had become the safest place she owned. Several Sunshore fighters stayed awake beside the doors. Their spear points faced the forest now. The day before, those same points had faced us. The next morning, Tamsin met me in the central clearing. Her fighters stood behind her. Mine stood behind Tucker. Nobody had forgotten the ruined Sunshore homes. Join our settlement, I told Tamsin. Your people keep you as their direct leader. My weapons, houses, food, and protection become yours. I lead the combined tribe. Tamsin's fingers tightened around the whip. I won't order my people to surrender because they slept beneath your roof for one night. Then give them a result they can judge, I told her. Tamsin pointed at Tucker. One fight, your commander against my champion. The winner sets the merger terms. I accepted. Tamsin called forward. Cassia Ridley, her 24-year-old fiercest guard. Cassia carried a stone knife in each hand, looked past Tucker at me and said, "Sunshore won't belong to you." Tucker rolled one shoulder. "One fighter?" Sunshore finally learned counting. Cassia answered, "Keep talking. I want the last thing you say to be embarrassing." Good, they disliked each other efficiently. Before the duel, I sent Bowen onto the nearest roof with one spear. Bowen asked, "Which target?" I told him, "The first person who breaks the rule." The duel began. Cassia moved faster. Tucker controlled space. She slashed his forearm, then tried to slip behind him. Tucker caught her wrist, drove his shoulder into her chest, and threw her across the dirt. Sunshore shouted for Cassia. Our people answered for Tucker. Cassia rolled up and attacked low. Tucker blocked one knife with his spear shaft and kicked the second from her hand. Her heel hit his knee. Tucker dropped, but he kept the spear between them. Then a second Sunshore warrior rushed from the crowd and struck Tucker behind the shoulder. That made it 2 against 1. Tucker stumbled. Cassia looked at the opening beside him. She did not attack Tucker. She ran straight at me. I stayed still. Cassia crossed half the clearing with one knife raised. Bowen's spear dropped from the roof and struck through her upper side. The impact turned her body and drove her into the dirt several feet from my chair. Tucker spun on the second fighter and knocked her flat with the spear shaft. Sunshore warriors raised their weapons. One Sunshore warrior shouted, "Cheat!" The roof fighter cheated. I stood despite the pain. "2 of your fighters attacked one man," I told them. "Then your champion came for me. Do not use the word fair again." Our hunters closed around Bowen's position. Sunshore moved toward Cassia. One bad breath would have started a clan war inside my new settlement. Tamsin stepped between both sides and cracked her whip across the dirt. Nobody moved past her. She faced her own fighters first. We lost the duel when the second warrior attacked Tucker. Cassia's strike at Rylan was an assassination. Anyone defending it is defending my shame. The second fighter lowered her head. Tamsin knelt beside Cassia. Blood darkened the ground beneath the spear wound. Cassia's breathing had become shallow. Tamsin looked up at me. Her voice changed. "Cassia has guarded me longer than anyone alive. Do not execute her. Please use your medicine." The queen had tied me to a post the day before. Now she was asking for her warrior's life in front of both clans. I had one small dose left. Cassia had tried to kill me. I opened the pouch anyway. The spear shaft came out first. I spread a thin layer of ointment around the wound and pressed the edges closed. Enough medicine slowed the bleeding and steadied her breathing. A smear remained for my own injuries. Within minutes, Cassia's color returned. Sunshore women touched the edge of her bandage and stared at me as if I had pulled her back from death. Their weapons lowered one by one. The Sunshore mother I had seen at the feast placed her spear on the ground beside Cassia. Another woman copied her. Then, a third. By the time I offered Tamsin my hand, a line of stone points lay in the dirt. I offered Tamsin my hand. Tamsin took my hand and stood. I pulled her into a one-armed embrace before she could reconsider. She stiffened, then rested one hand against my shoulder instead of throwing me. "You keep command of Sunshore's people," I told her. "Inside the combined tribe, final command is mine. Food, houses, weapons, and enemies become shared." Tamsin answered, "Agreed." The two clans cheered. Tucker lifted the bullhorn whistle. Nola began assigning shared guard posts before the noise faded. Tamsin's fighters moved beside ours instead of facing them. The merger was complete. Then Tamsin stepped back and raised her voice over everyone. "I have one final condition. Rylan Wilder will become my partner in the full moon ceremony." I pictured an entire married life before I remembered to ask what the ceremony involved. "Agreed," I answered. "Too fast." Several Sunshore women exchanged looks and smiled like I had just volunteered for something nobody had explained. In the central clearing, before the merger cheering finished, the frontier system counted our people. Current population, 46 of 50, 4 short. Tamsin's clan had pushed my settlement to 46, but the system still wanted 4 more people before the deadline. Then it asked me to name the new tribe. I looked at the houses, the bull hides, the patched roofs, and the adults who had tried to kill each other yesterday. "Rookie tribe," I decided. Tucker frowned. "What's a rookie?" "Someone new who survives long enough to become dangerous." Tucker accepted that immediately. He had been one for weeks. The name spread through the settlement. Sunshore families moved into houses. My original hunters shared fire and meat with people they had recently considered rivals. Tamsin stood beside me while both groups repeated the new name. For one clean moment, the merger felt perfect. Then I overheard 2 Sunshore women discussing the full moon ceremony. One woman whispered, "The old queens always consume their partners afterward. It gave them strength." The second woman nodded. "Sometimes they cut the man apart first. My married life fantasy died before the honeymoon existed. I had agreed to become Tamsin's partner. Apparently, Sunshore thought partner and ceremonial snack belonged in the same job description. I had become the male praying mantis of the primitive era, except I had volunteered. I backed away from the women and nearly walked into Emery. She was still wrapped around the side where the bull spear had entered, but her grin looked healthy. "You changed your mind about Tamsin?" Emery asked. I'm gathering information. Emery jumped in. Choose me instead. I've never eaten a partner. Strong offer. Excellent timing. Nola caught Emery by the shoulders and steered her toward the nearest house. You can barely walk, Nola told her. Stop trying to win a husband through competitive cannibalism. Emery looked back at me. My offer stays open. Nola glanced over her shoulder. Mine comes with organized storage and 0 ritual knives. Emery stopped walking. You have an offer too? Nola kept pushing her forward. I've got options. Emery and Nola were now competing with a woman who was not even in the clearing. The next morning, I found Tamsin alone beside the drying racks. Her whip was tied at her waist. Tamsin smiled when she saw me approaching first. I skipped the romantic opening. Did Sunshore Queens kill and eat their partners? Tamsin stared at me for 2 breaths. Then she laughed so hard she had to grab the rack. I hated being the punchline in my own survival question. Tamsin finally straightened. Some queens before me followed that custom. They believed consuming a powerful partner added his strength to theirs. Very efficient tradition, I muttered. She stepped close and hooked one finger beneath the edge of my bullhide cloak. I've never taken a partner, Tamsin told me. I don't plan to kill my first one. My shoulders loosened. Then her finger tightened against the hide. Betray me, Rylan, and you may still discover why the rumor survived. My relief lasted 2 seconds. Tamsin was still Tamsin. I told her, good. I prefer dangerous women with clear policies, she smiled. You prefer dangerous women, the rest is an excuse. In my defense, the evidence was becoming difficult to dispute. The frontier system interrupted before I could lose that argument. 7 days remaining, current population, 46 of 50. The marriage question had an answer. The population clock still showed 7 days. So I went south that morning to find the Brackwater clan. Colby guided me along the beach while the tide pulled away from dark sand. We expected shouting, fighting, or somebody chasing stolen meat. We found silence. The first body lay beside an overturned cooking pit. More were scattered between the huts. Some had spear wounds. Others carried deep claw marks across their backs and faces. 2 bodies still gripped each other, and the blood around them was fresh enough to darken the sand. The settlement had been destroyed recently. The wounds made it look like Brackwater had turned on itself after another force attacked. I needed 4 recruits. The beach had given me bodies. Colby knelt beside a broken spear. These people fought one another. Before I could answer, branches snapped behind us. One of our scouts stumbled onto the beach, breathing hard. Rylan, survivors from Brackwater are attacking our settlement. Tucker can't hold them alone. We had found the survivors. They were attacking us. We ran north. By the time I reached our settlement, Tucker's fighters had formed a line between the houses and the animal pens. Tamsin's Sunshore warriors reinforced both ends. The Brackwater survivors had lost every trace of the noisy brawlers I had watched over the dodo. They attacked like starving animals. One man took a spear shaft across the jaw and kept running. A woman drove her shoulder through 2 defenders. Then she clawed at the hide armor while a dropped weapon lay beside her. Another survivor seized Tucker's spear with both hands and pulled himself farther onto the point just to reach Tucker's throat. Tucker released the shaft, slammed his forearm across the man's chest, and barely escaped the bite. Their eyes were unfocused. Their mouths worked without words. Cuts covered their arms, yet pain did nothing. Tucker knocked one attacker down with the flat of his spear. The man rose before Tucker could step back. Tucker warned, "They don't stop!" "Then stop trying to scare them," I answered. "Break their formation. Keep them alive. We needed answers more than bodies." A huge Brackwater fighter rushed me and clamped his teeth onto the bullhide cloak. My elbow bounced off his temple. He tore away only the dark section stained by my reopened wound. The clean hide hit the ground immediately. He wanted the blood, not the cloak. Then several attackers broke from Tucker's line and charged past armed hunters toward one house. Cassia lay inside, recovering from the spear wound she took during the duel. Fresh blood had soaked through the edge of her bandage. Cassia came from Sunshore and lay hidden behind a solid wall. The attackers were following the smell. I cut across their path and struck the first attacker behind the knee. Tamsin pulled Cassia out through the rear opening, while Nola wrapped another clean hide around the leaking bandage. Every Brackwater head turned with them. They were hunting blood. I grabbed Colby's shoulder. "Bring the 3 boar cubs, now!" His face changed. Those animals were our future food and the first livestock we had raised. Colby still ran. Tamsin heard the order. "You're sacrificing the pen?" "I'm choosing animals over people," I told her. "The attackers follow blood. We give them blood that can move." Colby returned carrying 1 squealing cub while 2 hunters brought the others. I scratched each animal just enough to draw scent, then released them toward the river path. The cubs ran. Every Brackwater survivor turned at once. They abandoned our fighters and chased the blood through the trees. Tucker stared after them. "That worked." "Celebrate after they stop moving," I told him. We followed at a distance with paralytic spears ready. The cubs reached the shallow river. The Brackwater group crowded over them, driven by the scent. I heard the animals squeal once. Then the largest fighter twitched, his legs folded. One by one, the others collapsed around him before we threw a single poison spear. We hadn't thrown a poison spear. Their own bodies had failed before our weapons touched them. I ordered Tucker to bind every survivor and place them in the livestock cages. The boar cubs were gone. I had spent our first livestock to keep human captives alive. Several hours later, the captives woke beside the animal pens. Their first clear word was water. I gave the largest man a bowl through the wooden bars. He drank, coughed, and grabbed the second bowl with both hands. After rest and water, his voice returned. Nola crouched beside the cage. "What's your name?" The man looked from her to my bullhide cloak. Fear replaced the empty rage. "Are you Iron Peak?" he rasped. The man was Garrick Broderick, the 29-year-old surviving chief of Brackwater. He had no memory of attacking us. I answered, "This is the Rookie tribe. Iron Peak is somewhere else. Tell me what you remember." Garrick held the empty bowl and spoke in broken pieces. A child in Brackwater had caught a fat dodo. Iron Peak warriors took it from him. When Garrick confronted them, more warriors entered the settlement without warning. They attacked adults and children alike. Garrick remembered a sharp smell spreading through the huts. His eyes burned. His balance failed. He saw his own people striking at shapes around them. Then an Iron Peak weapon hit his head. He woke inside my cage. Garrick looked toward the south. "My people will be waiting for me." I had already walked through what remained. There were no living people at Brackwater when I arrived, I told him. The bowl slipped from his hands. Garrick pressed both palms against his face and bent forward until his forehead touched the cage floor. None of us spoke. He had led a loud, divided clan. Now the few people breeding behind him were all he had left. A dry leaf fell from the hair near his shoulder. The frontier system identified the leaf as industrial hemp. Burned in heavy smoke, it could numb pain and distort perception. Similar fragments clung to the other survivors. I showed Garrick the leaf. He remembered the sharp smell before he fell. The leaf explained the numb pain and warped senses. I suspected Iron Peak had used smoke, but the exact mixture and sudden collapse remained unknown. I could not prove who aimed the survivors at our camp. My people had still bled for it. Garrick lifted his head. His voice had gone cold. "Open the cage," he told me. "Give us weapons. We'll serve you until Iron Peak is dead." I crouched in front of him. "If you join me, revenge happens when I decide we can win. Some of your people will build, others will fish, and the rest will guard. You obey the tribe before your anger." Garrick looked back at the survivors. Then he placed one fist against his chest. "Protect the last of Brackwater, and our lives belong to the Rookie tribe." The others copied him. Tucker watched the people who had tried to bite through his line. Tamsin watched the former enemy chief bow toward our settlement. Then both leaders lowered their weapons. The last Brackwater survivors had entered as attackers and chosen to stay as allies. I opened the cage myself. Only after the last bar lifted did the frontier system appear. Civilization mission complete. Population target exceeded. The counter climbed past 50. Because 7 days remained, the frontier system added an early completion bonus. 3 attribute points appeared, along with a material chest, fresh medicine, a surprise pack, and 1 unidentified carved plaque. The material chest held a full ton of red-black hematite ore. I pulled 1 heavy piece from storage and dropped it beside Nola. The stone struck the ground with a metallic thud. She stared at it. "Useful?" "Metal weapons," I told her. "Eventually." The fresh ointment restored a useful reserve after Cassia. I handed the pouch to Nola, and she closed both hands around it like it was worth more than the ore. Emery, Cassia, and many of my fighters were still recovering. This reward could keep the next wound from becoming a funeral. I spent the 3 points on strength. Heat spread through my bones. My shoulders widened, my back straightened, and my hair dropped farther across my face as my body adjusted. Nola looked me up and down without shame. "The king's packaging improved," she decided. I pushed the hair from my eyes. "Focus on the ore. I can focus on 2 resources." 50+ people crowded around the ore while Nola held the new medicine. Garrick and the survivors stood free behind them, but none of them celebrated. Their hollow faces still carried the price of that reward. The 50-person mission was finally complete. The problem was, I had every reason to believe the clan that turned Garrick's people into rabid weapons already knew we existed. Right after the 50-person reward landed at the Rookie settlement, I inspected a ton of ore, fresh medicine, and 1 carved plaque. The ore promised metal. The plaque promised civilization. Its first real achievement would be making half my workforce hide indoors until we invented clothes. I spent technology points to identify it. Modesty plaque? Repeated exposure encourages privacy, clothing, and shared social restraint. The effect spread through repeated exposure, so I placed the plaque near the central fire. Considering Tamsin treated any quiet stretch of river like a private bath, this felt like defensive technology. Nola inspected the carving beside me. So your newest reward is a rock that teaches embarrassment? I told Nola. Civilization had to start somewhere. Apparently, it started with covering up. Nola adjusted the hide strap at her shoulder. Then I expect better clothes. You stare enough already. I was reading the plaque, I told her. Of course you were. The joke lasted until I looked around. More than 50 people needed food and protection, and Iron Peak had already shown it could destroy a clan without facing us. Nola lowered her voice. We could send food and ask what Iron Peak wants. Garrick heard her. His jaw tightened. They slaughtered Blackwater before asking anything, I told Nola. We prepare first. I sent Garrick's fishers to the river, his strongest workers to Tucker, and his spiders to patrol training. Then I handed Garrick a strip of smoked bull meat. He chewed it and frowned. This is what warriors eat? Warriors eat whatever gets them to the next fight, I told him. He finished the strip. Tucker received the harder job. I walked him around the narrow river, forest, and southern approaches. We would layer traps, then put beacon towers behind them. Only Tucker and I would know every location. Crews would rotate, nobody would draw a full map, and he had to memorize the network. He stared at me. You trust me with every path into the tribe? I trust you to remember holes better than straight walls, I answered. Tucker ignored the insult and looked at the ground again. His shoulders had already changed. The man who once tied me to a post had become the only person holding my complete defense plan. That night, I passed out beside an unfinished trapline while Tucker checked the next shift. In my dream, I was back inside a city bar. Music played. Beautiful women crowded the table. One leaned against my shoulder and asked whether primitive kings still bought drinks. I put an arm around her waist. Then Tucker's voice entered the dream. Rylan, remove your hand! I opened my eyes. My face was against Tucker's shoulder. One arm was locked around his middle. Tucker held a shovel and looked ready to use it as a weapon. I released him so fast I nearly rolled into the unfinished pit. You were a woman 2 seconds ago, I told him. Tucker stepped back. You were making promises. I had survived monsters, assassination, and Tamsin's whip. Flirting with Tucker in my sleep felt worse. New personal low. Anyway, the night shift had started. I demonstrated one layered trap and kept the lesson short. The first line was a deep pit hidden beneath leaves. The second was a tripcord. When I pressed it with a branch, a weighted bundle jerked upward inside a woven net. Bowen watched the cord, reset it once, and repeated the catch without help. Good, I told him. You train the crews. Tucker chooses placement. Nobody walks backward near fresh leaves. One prototype, one result. Then the work moved without me. The following morning, I walked into a settlement that looked abandoned. No women stood near the cooking fires. The drying racks were empty. Half the house crews had disappeared. Nola opened one door while wrapped in a full hide blanket. Your plaque worked, she announced. Now everyone is suddenly aware that their clothes are terrible. Behind her, several women refused to step outside wearing the same short hides they had used for years. Emery leaned through another doorway. Her spear wound had improved, but she still moved carefully. You wanted civilization, Emery called. Civilization wants pants. Fighting a bull king was easier than ordering 50 embarrassed adults outside, so I gave the clothing crews half a day. Nola organized hides and fiber. Emery directed the cutting from a seat because lifting still pulled at her wound. By afternoon, people returned to work wearing rough wraps, longer skirts, and enough extra leather to restart the economy. The modesty plaque had improved social behavior and destroyed one morning of productivity. Balanced reward. The trap crews found something useful before sunset. A worker struck pale stone beneath the soil and threw sparks from his tool. Flint filled the edge of the pit. Tucker climbed down to inspect it. Then he pressed 2 fingers into a darker, softer layer. Before I could stop him, he touched the material to his tongue. His face changed. Dung, Tucker said. I stared at my defense commander. You are the only scout I know who gathers intelligence with his mouth. Tucker spat until Bowen laughed hard enough to drop a rope. The buried layer was old. Too much waste had collected in one place to come from a single animal. An older camp might have used the ground before us, or some huge herd had treated it as a toilet. I could prove neither answer. We kept the flint, covered the dung, and moved the drinking path farther away. Then I ordered more traps and beacon towers facing north, west, and south. Iron Peak might know this land better than we did. I wanted smoke in the sky before an enemy reached our houses. 4 days later, I inspected 10 finished houses around the central fire. They were rough, crowded, and still standing. For Tucker, that counted as luxury. Emery crossed the clearing the moment she saw me. She wrapped both arms around my chest and hit me hard enough to drive my back into one finished wall. The wall cracked. Everyone stopped. Emery looked over my shoulder at the broken support. We finished 10 houses. I looked at the damage. You finished 9 and assigned yourself 1 repair. She smiled without releasing me. Worth it. In my defense, the hug was also winning the argument. Beyond the houses, Garrick's people carried baskets of fish from the river. Nola salted and dried the catch while Sunshore families stacked jerky beneath raised roofs. People who had attacked one another days earlier now argued over fish, salt, and smoke racks instead of blood. Children slept indoors. Good enough. Tucker ruined the warm moment by arriving with the tower count. 3 beacon lines demanded more healthy watchers than we had. Traps, fishing, hunting, repairs, and children still needed hands. Expansion had given us more hands and twice as many jobs, so Duncan and I joined the southern construction crew. Duncan's old thigh wound still shortened his stride, but he refused lighter work. We had barely raised the next tower frame when smoke climbed from the southern beacon. One signal. A trap had triggered. I grabbed the axe and ran south with Duncan behind me. The trap had caught exactly one dangerous target. Unfortunately, it was Tamsin. Tamsin hung upside down from one ankle, her braided whip dangling beyond reach. Her royal hide wrap had stayed in place, but her face was already red with fury. Tamsin glared at me. Cut me down. I stepped closer and tapped her bare foot. I need to check for injuries. She tried to kick me with the trapped leg. I caught her heel and tickled the sole once. Tamsin's entire body jerked. Rylan Wilder, I will bury you in this pit. Beautiful threat. Terrible timing. Sunshore hunters were approaching through the trees. I moved across the trail before they saw her. Circle east. Check whether a second cord was disturbed. The hunters obeyed and disappeared around the brush. Behind me, Tamsin whispered, If they see me like this, your funeral happens today. I cut the vine, caught her around the waist, and set her upright before the hunters returned. She shoved me away, red-faced, then stayed close enough to whisper, Touch my foot again and lose the hand. The successful trap exposed the patrol gap behind it. Once she stopped threatening me, Tamsin jerked her chin toward the coast. Sunshore fishers found hyena tracks on the safer beach trail. I came alone to map a route before I sent children through it. Someone should have told me, I said. Tamsin folded her arms. Someone should have mapped his traps for his queen. Only Tucker and I know every location. That rule stays. Her eyes narrowed, but she accepted the answer. Then Tamsin glanced toward the southern brush. If one of Garrick's survivors hid this danger, execute the traitor before Iron Peak uses the same path, she said. I refused. Garrick's people held our line. The problem is the patrol gap. We clear the hyenas, place an outpost on the cliff, collect dodos, and dry salt beside the sea. Tamsin watched me. You sound worried. I am. Explaining why my queen became trap decoration would damage morale. She reached for the whip. I walked faster. At dawn, Garrick led his best fighters down the southern trail. A Sunshore child pointed toward the narrow path where the hyenas had chased gatherers before. A gray shape burst from the brush before the child finished. Garrick crossed the distance first. He seized the child by the shoulder, threw him behind the line, and drove a spear through the attacking hyena's chest. The rest of the pack rushed from both sides. Brackwater finally looked like the fighters Colby had described. They stopped brawling as individuals and moved around Garrick's commands. 2 held the center. Others struck from the flanks. The pack lost its first charge and never recovered. One hyena slipped through and came at me. I caught it beneath the throat, turned with its momentum, and slammed it into the ground. The animal stopped moving. Garrick looked over the bodies. That was the whole pack? I stared at him. You sound disappointed, Garrick answered. I was promised dangerous work. The combat addict had joined the correct tribe. With the road clear, we climbed the coastal cliff before noon. I pointed out 3 jobs, a shelter, a beacon, and a guarded salt field. 4 days, I told Garrick. Build the outpost and keep the route open. Garrick drove his spear into the chosen ground. Brackwater had lost its home. Now its survivors would build Rookie's second stronghold. The southern corridor was open, but the new territory worsened our manpower problem. Worse, Colby was missing. I had sent him north that morning to scout the lake and Snow Mountain. By sunset, he was overdue. 3 days after I ordered the beach outpost, Colby returned to the Rookie settlement after dark. Mud covered his legs. He carried no meat. More importantly, the 19-year-old scout who usually noticed every risk had forgotten to make a joke. Colby had found a wide northern lake beneath a snow mountain. Something enormous moved under the water, but he never saw enough of it to name the creature. He described a long wake crossing water with no wind. The surface lifted once near the far bank, then dropped before he could see ahead. Colby circled the shore instead of approaching and came home alive. Then he described footprints leading away from the lake toward the snow. Each depression was broad enough to hold one of our new houses. Bowen's face changed. The quiet throwing specialist had survived those tracks once before. He told us that the group Tucker led had originally held more than 30 people. A giant scattered them. The 15 people who captured me beside the river were only part of the survivors. Nola grabbed my arm. You are not walking toward the thing that cut Tucker's group in half, Bowen corrected her in a flat voice. It did worse than that. That ended the debate beautifully. The frontier system offered a mission. Find the giant. Reward, 1 attribute point. 1 point for seeing it. When the system that made me fight a saber-tooth paid for sight alone, the warning was loud enough. I scheduled a 4-person expedition after the partner ceremony. The ceremony came first because I had already made Tamsin wait, and surviving a giant only to die by whip felt inefficient. 2 days later, the rookie tribe gathered around the central fire. The clothing crews had made me a fitted bullhide coat and a narrow bone crown. Tamsin entered wearing layered dark hides with her braided whip at one hip. She looked gorgeous and completely aware of it. I forgot half my prepared speech. Then Emery stepped beside the fire and placed Tamsin's hand in mine. I kept the declaration plain. Tamsin Lockwood is my partner and queen of the rookie tribe. When I am gone, her command carries mine. Sunshore and Brackwater stand under the same protection. Anyone who follows me follows her. Tucker lowered his spear first. Garrick followed. Then Sunshore and the original camp moved together until every weapon pointed away from the royal pair. Emery tried to smile. Tears reached her face anyway. Nola took Emery's hand without teasing her. Tamsin saw both women, then faced the tribe again. I will guard what we built, Tamsin promised. No clan, beast, or coward will take these people while Rylan is absent. The settlement answered with one shout. Tamsin used the authority immediately. She ordered 1 Sunshore guard and 1 Brackwater fighter to take the Western Watch together. Neither looked happy. Both obeyed and left without asking me to confirm her order. Emery wiped her face and met my eyes. She still wanted the future she had claimed beside the first campfire. She stepped back instead of challenging Tamsin's place in front of the tribe. Nola stayed beside her and watched Tamsin with a smile that promised the rivalry was far from dead. I had arrived tied to a post. Now an entire tribe had accepted my queen. The wedding night consequences waited inside the largest house. Tamsin stood beside the sleeping platform with her whip uncoiled across the doorway. I stopped outside its reach. Romantic atmosphere. Very subtle. Tamsin tapped the handle against her palm. You made me queen this afternoon. Now I hear you're leaving at sunrise. One worker had told her about the packed supplies before I reached the house. Rookie communication was improving at the worst possible time. I explained the Northern Lake, Bowen's giant story, and the 1-point mission. If the giant had people, tools, or enemies, the expedition might reveal help against Iron Peak. If it had none of those, I still needed to know what lived beyond our new territory. Tamsin stepped closer. You plan to investigate with Bowen and Garrick while I learned about it from a worker? I plan to tell you tonight, I said. Tamsin tapped the whip against my side. During our ceremony night. I admit the schedule lacked romance, I told her. Her whip circled my waist and pulled me 1 step closer. Cassia goes with you, Tamsin decided. Her eyes stay on your back. I looked at the whip, then at her. You want the woman who tried to stab me walking behind me? Tamsin smiled. She already knows the position. Fair. Disturbing, but fair. In return, Tamsin accepted responsibility for training a stone sling unit while I was away. Small stones were plentiful. Trained slingers could defend walls without wasting our best spears. She tightened the whip once. You gave me authority. Let me use it. I told her, just remember that queens also have to untie their partners. Tamsin pulled me closer instead. Then Tamsin lowered the whip and set the real rule. I could leave at sunrise because she would command the settlement. In return, I had to tell her where I was going and stop disappearing only to return with new injuries. I promised the information. The injuries were harder to guarantee. Tamsin stared at me until I added, I will try. Tamsin loosened the whip and pointed at the door. I had permission to leave. Her glare said I still owed her. The next morning, 4 adults left through the northern trapline. Bowen carried throwing spears and my first simple bow. Garrick carried a heavy spear. Cassia carried 2 stone knives and enough hostility for the entire expedition. Cassia Ridley, Tamsin's fiercest guard and my former assassin, walked directly behind me. Every time a branch touched my shoulder, I checked whether it had a knife. Cassia noticed. Nervous? You attempted murder before breakfast last time, I answered. I respect consistency. Garrick laughed. Cassia did not. Near the northern lake, Garrick pointed toward dark water between the trees. He had once seen a creature strike beneath the surface and barely escape the wave it created. Bowen looked at him. You survived? Garrick shrugged. Luck. This poor man considered surviving a lake monster, a minor travel detail. Brackwater standards remained unhealthy. We continued toward the snow mountain through forest. None of us knew well. Bright fruit hung over one trail. The frontier system marked it poisonous before Garrick could take a bite. I slapped his hand away. Garrick frowned. I wasn't eating it. I pulled the fruit away. You were introducing it to your mouth. Cassia walked past us. Your warriors are impressive. He came from Brackwater, I told her. Self-preservation was optional there. Before noon, the frontier system identified 3 useful resources. Medicinal leaves grew along the lower slopes. A patch of cereal grass carried usable grain. Strong pale fibers could become rope, cloth, or paper later. I stripped one flexible branch, twisted the new fiber into a bowstring, and sent a blunt shaft through a hanging seed pod. Cassia watched my hands through the entire shot. She looked away when I noticed. The frontier system opened a farming mission: collect and plant several useful grains within 180 days. That deadline was generous by system standards. I immediately distrusted it. We gathered medicine, seed heads, and fiber until hyenas appeared between the trees. The first animal snapped at Bowen. Garrick drove it back with his spear. Cassia cut another across the nose. The pack retreated north. We chased because the same path led toward the giant tracks, and predators near the route would threaten future gathering crews. That decision lasted less than a minute before becoming stupid. The hyenas slipped through a field of enormous red flowers. Vines exploded from the ground behind them. One wrapped Bowen's throwing arm, another caught Garrick around the chest. 3 more seized Cassia's legs and dragged her toward the largest bloom. Cassia hacked at the vine with a stone knife. The edge began dissolving inside the plant's fluid. The frontier system identified the cluster as blood trap flowers. Their sap broke down weapons, hide, and trapped prey. Cassia threw the ruined knife away and reached for the second. The flower opened beneath her. The petals folded around Cassia and swallowed her whole. Bowen shouted her name. Garrick stabbed the vine holding him, but the spearhead softened against the same sap. I could hear Cassia striking from inside the closed flower. Each impact became weaker. The forest floor was dry. Dead wood lay beneath the vines. I still carried the flint we found under the old dung pit. I struck sparks into shredded bark, fed the flame, and shoved the burning bundle beneath the nearest vine. Fire ran through the dry growth. The vines released Bowen first. I cut Garrick free with the axe while he dragged Bowen away from the heat. Then I reached the flower holding Cassia. The outer petals tightened when I struck them, so I drove burning wood into the seam and forced the world cleaver through after the fire weakened it. The flower opened. Cassia fell out barely conscious. Her breathing was shallow, and red sap covered one side of her face. I cleared her mouth, checked that she could breathe, then dragged her beyond the snapping petals. Another vine wrapped around my ankle. Bowen severed it with the edge of his remaining spear while Garrick kicked burning branches across the path behind us. The rescue had freed Cassia, but the fire was now spreading through the whole trap field. Her hide armor had been damaged by the sap. I pulled off my royal coat, wrapped it around her, and lifted her before the next flowers caught fire. She was one of ours while she traveled under my command. We ran downhill toward the lake while burning vines cracked behind us. Bowen could barely move his injured arm. Garrick supported him. I carried Cassia against my chest until she woke and immediately tried to push away. "Put me down," Cassia ordered. "Leave me and get Bowen out." "Walk first," I answered. "Until then, you're coming with me." A surviving hyena burst from the smoke behind us. My bow lay across Cassia beneath the royal coat. She grabbed it, copied the stance she had watched earlier, and drew with shaking hands. Her first arrow struck through the hyena's open mouth. The animal dropped before it reached Garrick. Cassia lowered the bow. Bowen looked at the shot, then at her. "You watched one lesson," he said. Cassia answered, "It was enough." Her aim was excellent. Her attitude remained hostile, tragic. Once the fire stopped chasing us, Cassia could no longer support her weight. I carried her on my back while Garrick and Bowen moved ahead to gather the medicine we had dropped. Cassia stayed quiet for several minutes. Garrick and Bowen were several yards ahead when cold stone touched my throat. She had pulled my spare knife from my belt. "I knew the bulls were wounded before they reached Sunshore," Cassia told me. "Their path was too clean. Your fighters appeared from the same direction, and the herd obeyed fear when you arrived." Her blade pressed closer. "I thought you created the disaster," she continued. "I couldn't prove it, so I tried to kill you before Tamsin handed you our people." I kept walking. Cassia had seen enough to build the right conclusion. I had saved her, and I had still driven the bulls into her home. I told her, "You chose Tamsin over Weak-Proof. The choice made sense." "Do you deny it?" Cassia asked. I kept silent. Instead, I adjusted her weight and kept moving. "If you're going to cut my throat, wait until I stop carrying you." Cassia eased the blade away by 1 inch. "Betray Tamsin, and I won't wait. Fair condition. Try not to bleed on my royal coat before then." She returned the knife to my belt. I kept carrying her. Near sunset, we found the hyena den while collecting the last medicine. Several cubs huddled beneath roots. Their cries brought the surviving adults back to the edge of the brush. The pack stayed outside striking distance while we stood near the young. Now the chase made sense. Those hyenas had been pulling threats away from their den. Their flower field had been a shield, and we had followed them straight through it. Cassia looked at the cub under my arm. "We burned their protection." "Then we do not leave the young beside the ashes," I answered. "The frontier system offered a taming mission. We took the cubs because the burned territory would no longer protect them. Garrick carried 2. Bowen managed 1 with his good arm. Cassia held another beneath my coat and called it cargo twice. The predator problem had become a future hunting dog problem. Then a roar rolled through the trees ahead. Branches broke. A massive bear stepped onto the trail and blocked the injured group from the only safe path home. Bowen tightened his grip on the spear in his good hand. "Man-eater," he warned. The man-eating bear blocked the only clear trail home. Cassia could barely stand. Bowen had 1 useful arm. Garrick carried 2 hyena cubs and enough anger to challenge anything with teeth, so I made the decision nobody else could afford. "Garrick, take them south," I ordered. "Do not stop until the fire is behind you." Cassia pushed away from my shoulder. "You can't fight that alone." "Correct," I told her. "That's why I'm going to annoy it and run." I handed the remaining cub to Garrick, struck the bear across the nose with the flat of the axe, and sprinted north. The bear roared and followed me. Good! The injured group had a path. Bad. I had become dinner with legs. I ran toward the snow mountain because the trees grew thinner there. The bear tore through brush behind me and gained every time the ground rose. Then another roar came from my left. I knew that sound. The same saber-tooth from my first day burst between the trees and attacked from behind. Look, I had spent weeks becoming stronger. Apparently, the tutorial boss had spent those weeks holding a grudge. I veered downhill and expected the predators to fight over me. They did not. The bear kept chasing. The saber-tooth kept chasing. 2 apex predators had formed the least welcome alliance in history. The frontier system opened 1 emergency option. Emergency escape available. Duration, 600 seconds. Effect, extreme agility. Strength will be converted into stamina. Cost, approximately 1/3 of displayed core stats will be permanently lost after use. 10 minutes of speed, a permanent bill afterward. Using World Cleaver at full output could leave me unconscious for days. Refusing the emergency mode could leave me dead in minutes. I accepted. The forest slowed. My next step covered twice the distance. The bear's paw struck empty dirt behind me. The saber-tooth lunged, and I changed direction before its claws reached my coat. I ran between 2 close boulders, waited until both predators committed, then cut sideways. The bear hit the saber-tooth's shoulder first. The collision sent the tiger rolling. Behind it, the bear crashed through a dead tree. Their accidental collision bought me seconds, so I kept moving. Emergency escape's countdown kept dropping as I ran toward the snow. I crossed ground that should have taken an hour while the predators shrank behind me. By the time the timer dropped below half, I had reached the lower snowfield. That was where I found the giant. It stood beyond a ridge, taller than the trees below it. 1 arm looked thick enough to lift the bull king. The giant moved through snow that reached my knees as if it were dust. The frontier system paid 1 attribute point the moment I saw it. Then another mission appeared. Attack the giant. Reward, 10 attribute points. The system required 1 attack. Damage was never part of the rule. Rules are rules. Greed is also greed. I picked up the smallest pebble I could find and threw it. The stone struck the giant's calf. The giant looked down. For 1 terrible second, I thought I had become interesting. Then it brushed the spot and kept walking. The frontier system awarded 10 points. I had paid permanent stats to survive, then recovered more than I lost by disrespecting a mountain-sized man with gravel. Beautiful, also completely irresponsible. The system immediately offered a 3rd stage. Defeat the giant alone. Reward, 100 attribute points. Before I could reject it, the giant noticed my movement near the ridge. It slapped 1 hand against the ground. Snow and stone erupted across the slope. The impact buried me to the chest and shook the air from my lungs. The giant had merely swatted the ground near me. I rejected the mission. 100 points sounded excellent. Dying before I spent them sounded less excellent. The last burst of emergency escape got me away from the snowfield. When the timer ended, the borrowed speed vanished and the cost hit. My legs folded, every muscle emptied. The interface blurred before I could read the final loss. Several days later, I limped back into the rookie settlement. Garrick's group had already returned with Cassia, Bowen, and the hyena cubs. Search teams had been looking for me since the first night. The crowd rushed the gate. Tamsin reached me before anyone else. She smiled for the tribe, wrapped both arms around me, and made my collapse look like an embrace. "The king is tired," she announced. "Everyone back to work." Nobody saw my knees fail. The moment the house covering closed, Tamsin shoved me onto the bedding and planted 1 hand against my chest. "Stay down," she ordered. I tried to sit. I found the giant. She pushed me flat again. "You also found a new way to return half dead. Congratulations." In my defense, the giant missions had paid well. Tamsin's defense was stronger. I looked like the forest had rejected me. She checked every wound, made Nola bring water, and refused to let the crowd see how badly my hands shook. The queen I had appointed for my absence was already protecting my authority from my own body. Once I could focus, I checked the numbers. Emergency escape had cost 4 points. The giant missions paid 11. I restored the weak areas and pushed agility across its next threshold. Heat moved through my bones. My legs lengthened, my shoulders widened, and the hide shirt tore down the back. Tamsin looked at the ruined clothing. I looked at her. She pointed toward the door. "You're not leaving this house dressed like that!" The clothing crews made replacement pants before sunset. The next morning, I ignored the rest order and walked to the training field. Tamsin had already formed a sling unit. Sunshore women spun stone slings overhead while Tucker's workers raised bark targets beyond the houses. Tamsin snapped one sling forward. The stone punched through the center target. Every trainee copied her stance. She had taken one wedding night bargain and turned it into ranged defense while I was gone. Competent women remained dangerous to my ego. Then Tamsin noticed my new pants. Her eyes narrowed. "Who made those?" "The clothing crew," I answered. Tamsin pinched the new waistband. "Which woman?" "Several," I told her. My body changed after the giant reward. The old pair stopped cooperating. Tamsin walked around me once like she expected evidence to fall out. "You disappeared for days and returned taller in another woman's pants," she said. "You understand the problem," I told her. "I understand that the pants survived longer than my explanation." Her mouth twitched. Then Tamsin reported that Cassia could walk again, and Bowen could use his arm, though neither was ready for a real fight. Garrick had already asked 3 times when we would attack Iron Peak. Of course he had. Garrett treated recovery like an offensive delay. The tribes still needed shared numbers. That afternoon, I carved 1 through 9 onto a board and matched each symbol to stones for people, food, spears, and days. The group copied them. My technology total reached 100. Technology shop unlocked. I ignored the long menu and bought the first finished iron object in our world. An iron cauldron dropped beside the fire. The settlement went silent. The pot was large enough to boil water for families. Turned sideways, it could block arrows. With enough desperation, Tucker could probably wear it as armor. I walked around it and slapped both sides. Then I danced once because I had just purchased the first finished iron object in our world. Unfortunately, everyone was watching. Tucker lowered his voice. "The king is speaking to the iron spirit." I stopped mid-step. "Correct," I told him. "The spirit says bring water and fish." The lie saved my dignity by creating work. We boiled water, then added fish, salt, and herbs. Soon, the first hot soup large enough for the whole settlement was ready. Children held wooden bowls with both hands. Garrick survivors went quiet over the steam. Sunshore workers brought the first finished baskets of sea salt from the southern outpost. The frontier system rewarded boiled water, preserved salt production, and communal cooking. The technology points nearly refunded the cauldron. Tamsin tasted the soup. "The iron spirit cooks well." I leaned closer. "Its king deserves a reward." Then I caught her by the waist and kissed her where both tribes could see. Tamsin kissed me back. Emery stared into her bowl. Nola smiled like she had just found material for the next month. The title promise was doing excellent work. My domestic survival chances remained unstable. A trap alarm interrupted the feast. At the western pit, we found a female hyena caught between the stakes. She had avoided the sharpest points and was still fighting the ropes. The frontier system identified her as a nursing mother. The captured cubs had refused meat and cried through the night. A nursing mother was the first real chance to save them. I bound the mother's muzzle, secured her legs, and sent her to Colby under guard. "Keep the cubs close," I told him. "If they recognize her, loosen 1 rope at a time." Colby nodded and carried the smallest cub toward the enclosure. The mother hyena stopped fighting long enough to track the sound. That gave the taming mission a chance again. The next morning, I returned north with Garrick, Cassia, and Bowen to collect millet and medicine. We filled hide sacks with ripe grain before blood on the wind stopped us. A wounded female bear staggered through the trees. Several cuts covered her body, and her steps dragged as poison reached her legs. A torn lump of poisoned bait lay in her tracks, and one pursuing hunter carried more in a hide pouch. Iron Peak hunters followed at a distance. One younger warrior jabbed the bear from behind and laughed when she stumbled. The older chief struck the man's spear aside so hard it broke against a rock. "A hunter kills cleanly," the chief warned. "Do not torture prey you did not defeat." The older chief was Heath Ashen, the 38-year-old leader of Iron Peak's hunters. His people carried black obsidian blades and moved in disciplined lines. Heath prepared to finish the bear himself. Garrick recognized Iron Peak and reached for his spear. I caught him around the chest and dragged him behind the brush before he exposed us. "They killed Brackwater," Garrick hissed. "And they outnumber us on ground they chose," I answered. "Charge now, and the last of Brackwater dies here." He fought my grip for 1 second, then stopped. The frontier system removed our option to stay hidden. One-time rescue mission, stopped the bear's bleeding and toxin within 10 minutes. Failure penalty, strength and stamina disabled for 7 days. A king who needed carrying for a week would become public comedy before breakfast. The bear sagged again. I accepted and stepped between Heath and the wounded animal. Heath's obsidian blade stopped inches from my axe. "Move," he ordered. "Give me 10 minutes," I answered, "then decide whether you still want the bear." Heath looked at the medicine pouch, then at Garrick emerging behind me with his spear raised. Iron Peak warriors advanced. Cassia and Bowen blocked the first pair, while Garrick met another head-on. They were still hurt from the flower field, yet they held the line because I had both hands on the bear's wound. I pressed fresh ointment into the deepest cut and bound it tight. The bleeding slowed. Poison kept spreading. Her breathing weakened while the timer kept falling. Garrick knocked one warrior back, then took an obsidian cut across the shoulder. Bowen lost his spear. Cassia dragged him clear and kept fighting with a stone knife. Heath watched their formation instead of joining the easy kill. "Take your wounded and leave," he told me. "I will not chase you today." Garrick spat blood into the dirt. Brackwater did not receive that mercy. He charged again. Heath swung once. A visible wave of force tore through leaves and threw Garrick backward. I left the bear for one heartbeat, raised World Cleaver and caught the remaining force on the black blade. The impact drove my feet through the soil, but it stopped before reaching the wounded hunters. Heath lowered his weapon. "What tribe?" he asked. "Rookie," I answered. His eyes moved from the axe to the fighters protecting my back. "Then grow stronger, Rookie King," Heath told me. "Next time, bring the same number of warriors I bring. We settle our border with equal bodies," he ordered Iron Peak to withdraw. Garrick tried to follow. I caught his arm. "We have a poisoned bear, 3 wounded people and no antidote," I told him. "Revenge waits." Heath's fighters carried their injured away. Several kept looking back at World Cleaver. Heath never offered a second strike. The rescue timer entered its final minute. Bleeding had stopped. Poison still held the bear down. I crushed honeysuckle with a bitter detox root. The frontier system only marked the root as potentially useful. I gambled on it. Garrick held the bear's jaw while I forced the mixture into her mouth. The countdown reached its last seconds. The bear swallowed. Her breathing caught once, then deepened. Rescue mission complete. Condition stabilized. The system awarded points, but the bear still could not travel. Garrick looked toward the Iron Peak Trail. "We can catch them before dark." "No," I told him. "Today we keep our people alive. We fight Heath when our numbers and ground are ready." I sent Garrick, Cassia, and Bowen home with the millet, medicine, and news of the equal number challenge. Then I stayed beside the bear through the night. Blood drew scavengers after sunset. I killed the first one with the axe, roasted part of the meat, and left the rest raw beside the bear. She woke slowly and watched me eat. I slid the raw portion closer. "You almost started a war," I told her. "At least have dinner." She ate without taking her eyes off me. The timer was gone. I stayed anyway and kept the fire between her and the dark. At sunrise, the bear pushed a piece of meat toward me. The frontier system credited the voluntary bond with a small taming reward. Then I stood to leave. She followed. I walked faster. She caught the back of my coat in her teeth and pulled me toward the rookie trail. "You want to come?" The bear tugged again. I named her Bramble. When we reached the settlement, the gate guards raised every spear. I stepped beside Bramble and lowered the nearest point. "She is with me," I told them. Bramble stood taller than the guards and accepted the announcement like she had founded the tribe herself. The rookie tribe had gained a bear ally, Heath's future challenge, and one more reason for every neighboring clan to stare. Bramble choosing me felt like a miracle. On our next trip north, the lake began moving, and even she refused to take one more step. The morning after Bramble joined the rookie tribe, I took her north along Heath's old trail. He had promised an equal number fight. I needed an answer before Iron Peak returned with bodies trained to break ours. A bamboo grove blocked the lower path. I cut one hollow stalk. Firecrackers needed bamboo, charcoal, crude nitrate, and sulfur. Our fires and the buried dung pit Tucker found covered 2 ingredients. Bamboo gave me the tube, sulfur was missing. A loud blast could break a charge or buy my fighters one clean opening. One opening had killed the Bull King. The frontier system credited the idea. My rough map showed volcanic ground beyond the northern lake, so I searched there. So Bramble carried me toward the water Colby had found. She stopped before the tree line ended. The huge bear lowered her body, growled once, and backed away from the shore. Bramble had walked through Iron Peak hunters beside me. Whatever lived under that lake had offended her confidence. Then the water began moving. Bubbles rolled across the surface. A dark shape rose beneath them, long enough to turn the center of the lake black. The head broke through first. A Tyrannosaurus climbed from the water. Its shoulders rose above the reeds. Mud poured from its jaws. Around its neck sat a thick collar, and a snapped tether dragged behind it through the lake. Look, I had thrown a pebble at a giant days earlier. I had already used my lifetime supply of terrible ideas. I slid from Bramble's back and pulled her deeper into the trees. The Tyrannosaurus turned toward a noise on the opposite shore. Its tail swept through the reeds and flattened a path wider than one of our houses. Bramble pressed against my side hard enough to move me. The bear who had challenged Iron Peak hunters wanted no part of this animal. That reaction told me more than any system rating could. I kept World Cleaver lowered. Drawing the axe would only make me the loudest snack nearby. We retreated one step at a time until trees blocked its view. Then a roar rolled over the lake. It was deep enough to shake water from the leaves. Bramble broke into a run, and I joined her without discussing dignity. The giant footprints and the monster beneath the lake belonged to a higher tier. The roar that scared my first saber-tooth probably did too. I could not prove which beast made that first roar. The snapped tether gave me one ugly possibility. A giant might have kept this Tyrannosaurus as a pet. Bramble kept moving until the lake disappeared behind the trees. We circled the lake through the forest and reached its northern bank. Beyond the water, snow covered the lower volcanic slope. Bramble scraped through it with both front paws while I followed a sharp smell like burned matches. Beneath the snow, yellow stone ran through a cracked patch of earth. The frontier system identified sulfur. I packed the ugly yellow stone into dry hides while Bramble kept looking toward the lake. That gave me every ingredient. The first firecracker could wait until I had a workbench and all 10 fingers, so we headed home. By late afternoon, Bramble carried me back through the rookie gate. The tribe stared at the sulfur for one confused moment. Then everyone stared at the bear. 2 children touched her side. A hunter asked whether she could carry 3 people. Tucker arrived with a folded hide and looked at Bramble's back like he was measuring a new troop platform. Bramble showed him every tooth she owned. Tucker stepped away. "She understands military planning," I told him. "She understands that you are annoying. She's an ally, not public furniture." Nola looked at me sitting on Bramble. "Royal furniture only?" "Royal emergency transport," I corrected. Bramble turned her head and nearly dumped me into the dirt. The tribe laughed. My living status symbol had opinions. I ordered the bamboo cut and dried. Before Tucker could ask how loud the weapon would be, a soaked coast worker ran through the gate. He had left the south outpost before sunrise. A marine reptile nearly 25 feet long had smashed the salt racks. It tore fishing lines apart and drove every worker away from the water. Each hour it stayed meant less salt, less fish, and one useless outpost. Our new economy had attracted its first customer. Naturally, the customer wanted to eat us. I rode Bramble south while the coast worker led us down the cleared route. Tucker followed with hunters and rope for the outpost evacuation. At the outpost, Garrick stood on the cliff with a heavy spear. Brackwater fishers crowded behind him while something massive rolled through the shallows below. The creature had a long snout, powerful flippers, and a body built for speed underwater. The frontier system labeled it an ichthyosaur. One broken salt rack floated beside it, another disappeared beneath its jaws. The fishers had tried driving it away with spears. Their snapped shafts covered the wet sand, and one man held a bleeding arm behind the cliff wall. The outpost had taken 4 days to build. Salt from those racks had fed every family at the cauldron. The monster was eating our food route and teaching the coast workers to fear the water again. Before we set the bait, a human-sized wake slid behind the ruined rack. A black flash winked beneath the shallows and vanished under the creature's churn. I mistook it for broken obsidian and kept my eyes on the reptile. Garrick pointed toward the beach. "It follows wounded fish, then turns away before touching dry ground." That gave me a plan. We dragged fresh bait across the shallows and left the blood trail toward the sand. Bramble waited behind a rock shelf while I stood knee-deep with World Cleaver ready. The ichthyosaur followed the scent. Garrick kept the fishers behind the cliff. Bramble paced beside the rock shelf waiting for my signal. I needed the reptile to commit past the point where its flippers could turn it quickly. Its back cut through the water. It rushed the beach, opened its jaws, and lunged for the bait. I stepped aside and drove World Cleaver across the softer belly. The blade opened a long wound. The beast should have kept moving onto sand. Instead, it twisted faster than anything that size had permission to move. Its jaws closed around my body before I could clear the water. One tooth crushed my ribs through the coat, and another tore my forearm. I jammed the axe handle across its mouth, but the ichthyosaur dragged me backward and dove. Cold water swallowed the beach. The surface vanished above me. My feet found nothing. The creature shook its head and forced me deeper while I fought to keep the handle between its teeth. On land, I could wrestle monsters. Underwater, strength only helped me spend air faster. Bramble plunged after us and caught the ichthyosaur's tail in her jaws. She pulled toward shore. The beast kicked hard enough to drag the bare chest deep and kept diving. My lungs started burning. The World Cleaver slipped 1 inch, then a woman shot through the dark water beneath us. She carried 2 black obsidian daggers. One blade entered behind the ichthyosaur's jaw. The second struck the soft joint under its flipper. The animal released me and snapped toward her. I kicked toward the surface, but my arms had gone numb. The woman planted one foot against the creature's snout and redirected its bite away from my legs. She rolled beneath its mouth, crossed both daggers, and drove them into the same wound I had opened. The ichthyosaur convulsed, then it stopped fighting. The woman caught my coat and dragged me upward. I woke on wet sand, coughing out enough water to reconsider my relationship with coastlines. The coast workers had dragged the dead reptile onto the shallows with ropes. Nobody cheered until my eyes opened. Then the nearest fisher sat down so hard he dropped his spear. The creature was dead, the salt route was usable again, and their king had nearly become part of the catch. Bramble stood over me, soaked and furious. Garrick knelt nearby. The unknown woman sat several feet away with both obsidian daggers across her knees. She was beautiful, breathing hard, and had just killed something my axe could not finish. In my defense, competence is extremely attractive. The woman waited until I could sit. "My name is Marina Vale," she told me. "I'm from the Deepwater clan. I came looking for Garrick." Marina was 25, built for the water and clearly unimpressed by kings who nearly drowned in front of her. I wiped my face. I usually introduce myself before a woman saves my life. Marina glanced at the lake behind me. "You were busy drinking it. Fair, she had earned that one." Garrick recognized the clan name. His expression hardened. "Deepwater vanished after Iron Peak moved south." Marina's grip tightened around the daggers. The jokes ended there. She told us Iron Peak had invaded Deepwater, chained its survivors near the Iron Peak settlement, and forced them to work. The prisoners hauled stone, carried water, and slept with their wrists bound. Anyone who slowed down was dragged away from the others. Marina kept her voice level until she mentioned her brother. Her older brother, Holden Vale, had created her only opening. He attacked a guard and pulled the others toward him. Marina stole the guard's obsidian daggers, cut her bindings, and escaped through the river while Holden stayed behind. "About 10 of our people are still there," Marina finished. "Holden is one of them, if they kept him alive." Garrick drove the butt of his spear into the sand. Iron Peak had slaughtered his clan. Now it held another clan in chains. Marina had escaped alone, crossed hostile water, and killed the creature destroying our coast before asking for anything. I owed her my life. The rookie tribe owed Deepwater an answer. I told Marina, "You found Garrick, you also found me. We'll go back for your people." Smoke rose beyond the western ridge. Every coast worker turned toward it. The western beacon burned above the trees. The Western Watch had orders to light it only when armed people crossed our boundary. Heath had promised an equal number battle. He had come to collect. I pointed at the dead ichthyosaur. "Tucker takes the coast workers, civilians, and that carcass home. Nothing useful stays behind." Then I faced Garrick. "Take Marina to the western route. Hold until I arrive. No revenge charge." Garrick looked ready to argue. Marina stood and handed him one obsidian dagger. "Save it for the people who deserve it." Garrick closed his hand around the dagger. He stopped arguing. By late afternoon, I reached the rookie settlement. Tamsin waited at the gate with her whip, sling, and the expression she used when she planned to overrule me. "I'm going west," she told me. "You're commanding here," I answered. "The coast is damaged. The wounded need protection. If I fall, every fighter follows you." Tamsin stepped close. "You keep assigning me the sensible job because you know I hate it. I assign it because nobody else can carry my command." A Sunshore slinger and a Brackwater spear fighter both looked toward Tamsin. Neither waited for me to repeat the order. Hers. She caught the front of my coat and pulled me close enough that the watching guards suddenly found the gate fascinating. "Come back breathing," Tamsin ordered. I told her, "That's the plan every time. Your plans have a poor record." "Fair." Her anger stayed, but her hand lowered from the whip. At the western trailhead, Colby had already gone ahead to mark the safest route. Bowen joined us with his recovering arm wrapped tight. Duncan's old thigh wound shortened one stride. Nola brought her bow. Emery arrived with a spear before Tamsin could order her back inside. Tamsin looked at Emery's healed side. "You took one spear for him already." Emery planted the new spear beside her. "Then I know where not to stand." The woman had survived a bull king and learned exactly none of the safe lessons. I left the reserve, the slingers, and the settlement guard under Tamsin's command. Then I took my 5 specialists west. At dusk, we reached the western ridge. Torches moved between the trees below us. The line stopped just outside our hidden traps. Heath Ashen had brought the exact number he promised. At dusk on the western ridge, our fighters waited above the trap field while Iron Peak torches moved through the trees. Heath stopped his line before the first hidden pit. No birds called, no insects moved through the grass. Even the small animals had fled from 2 groups of armed humans trying to breathe quietly. Heath studied the empty slope and raised his obsidian blade. "Rookie King," he called, "your forest has gone silent. Bring your people out. So much for the ambush." I stepped from cover with World Cleaver across one shoulder. My fighters emerged across 3 lanes, inside Colby's markers. Heath counted our visible fighters. Then he ordered the same number of Iron Peak warriors forward and left the rest behind the torch line. The man had walked into enemy territory, found the trap field, and still demanded equal bodies like the ridge belonged to him. Annoying. Also impressive. Heath pointed his blade at me. 1 leader against 1 leader. Let the others find their equals. Behind me, Colby crouched beside the hidden marker stones Tucker had placed. Heath had stopped before the killing pits, but the safe lanes still mattered. One wrong retreat could drop our own fighter onto a stake. I gave Colby 2 fingers. He shifted the nearest marker and opened a clean path toward the river. His job was keeping everyone alive around our own preparation. I answered, "You crossed my border. You don't set every rule." Heath smiled. "Then stop me." Garrick chose that moment to stop pretending patience had ever lived inside him. He charged from the riverside before either chief moved. A lean Iron Peak fighter crossed the ground and caught Garrick's spear on an obsidian blade. His name was Axel Pace, Heath's fastest enforcer, and his first step was quick enough to leave Garrick striking empty air. Their second collision tore dirt from the slope. Axel moved like Heath's force had been packed into a thinner body. He slid past Garrick's spearhead, struck the shaft near Garrick's hands, and forced the heavier man to reset. Garrick answered by driving the spear butt into Axel's ribs. Axel gave ground, then smiled when Garrick followed. Garrick recognized the bait and changed the angle. Each step pulled Axel closer to mud and water where speed had less room. Axel cut around the force, opened Garrick's old shoulder wound, and struck him twice before the spear could turn. Marina entered from the river with 1 obsidian dagger in each hand. She attacked Axel's exposed side. Another Iron Peak warrior came out of the water and hit her before she reached him. The border fight split in 4 directions within seconds. I tried to move toward Garrick. Heath blocked me. His obsidian blade hit World Cleaver hard enough to numb both hands. "Look at me," Heath ordered. "You asked your people to follow you here. Give them a king worth following." I pushed his blade aside. "Mine already follow me. Yours need a speech." Heath came at me again. He feinted toward my injured side, reversed, and struck the axe handle. World Cleaver nearly left my grip. I kicked his front knee before he could finish the disarm. He stumbled, then answered with the pommel against my jaw. I tasted blood. Heath reset his stance while his breathing roughened. I raised World Cleaver again. We had both moved. I only caught pieces while Heath tried to cut me open. After I woke, Bowen, Nola, Garrick, and Marina filled in what happened in their lanes. They remembered the blows, the orders, and who stopped moving. South of our duel, Nola waited beside a suspended log trap. An Iron Peak brute walked beneath it carrying a stone-headed club. She cut the release rope. The log dropped toward his shoulders. The brute looked up, planted both hands against the wood, and shoved it away. That impact should have flattened an ordinary fighter. He tore the log free from its ropes and lifted it across his shoulders. His name was Bodhi Hartzell. He was huge, delighted, and treating our kill trap like somebody had handed him a toy. Bodhi pointed the log toward me. "I want the king." Nola raised her bow. "You have to survive the women first." Bodhi looked at Emery, then at Nola. His grin widened. "Better." The brute had just upgraded his own problem and sounded happy about it. Heath never looked away from our duel. "Find another opponent." Bodhi sighed like the battle had disappointed him. Then Emery stepped into his path and grabbed the end of the log. Her old bull wound allowed one hard fight. Trading body blows with a human boulder would tear it open again. Good thing Emery had never respected sensible matchups. She pulled. Bodhi laughed and pulled back. The log barely moved between them. Nola fired an arrow into his upper arm. He glanced at it, annoyed rather than hurt. A second arrow struck his thigh. A third hit the back of one hand and loosened his grip. Emery twisted the log and dragged it across his body. Bodhi followed, still laughing, treating the smaller woman like a playmate. He swung the far end toward her. Emery ducked, but the wind from the log nearly took her feet. Nola's next arrow hit the hand controlling that side and spoiled the follow-through. Emery stepped on the log, ran 2 paces along it, and kicked Bodhi beneath the chin. The hit barely moved his head. It did make him laugh harder. "Again!" he demanded. Nola later told me she almost felt bad for him. Almost. The rope from the failed trap still lay around his feet. Nola shot an arrow through one loop and pinned it to the ground. Emery circled Bodhi with the free end while he kept turning to follow the log. One loop tightened around his ankles, then another. Bodhi noticed when both legs stopped moving separately. His smile disappeared. Emery yanked the log sideways. Nola pulled the rope from behind. The giant man toppled across the clearing and hit the slope hard enough to shake leaves loose. The failed trap had become a leash. Emery ripped the log from his hands and shoved it downhill before he could rise. That log did not stop at the bottom. Near the river, Garrick had locked both arms around Axel's waist. Axel drove his blade pommel into Garrick's back again and again. Garrick refused to release him. Every strike pushed both men closer to the water where Axel's speed mattered less. Marina's fight broke through the shallows beside them. Her opponent caught her wrist and threw her against a rock. She disappeared beneath the current. Garrick looked toward the splash. Axel used the opening and smashed him to one knee. Your clan died because it was weak, Axel told him. Wrong sentence. Wrong man. Garrick surged up, lifted Axel clear of the ground, and threw him across the bank. Axel hit hard and stopped moving. Garrick took one step toward the river. Axel rose behind him. Then Bodhi's stolen log came flying down the slope and struck Axel across the back. He dropped a second time. Garrick dropped beside him. Both men had spent everything. Revenge had finally put Iron Peak's fastest spider down, but Garrick could no longer stand to enjoy it. On the upper ridge, 2 Iron Peak brothers rushed straight for me. Bowen and Duncan intercepted them before they reached the king duel. The twins moved together. One attacked high while the other cut low. Bowen's recovering arm slowed his first throw. Duncan's damaged thigh shortened every retreat. One brother struck Bowen's wrapped arm first, knocking the spear aside before driving a short blade into his shoulder. The other slashed Duncan across the face and filled one eye with blood. The first twin pointed at Bowen's arm. "Your thrower came broken!" Bowen snapped the broken half of his spear into a shorter grip. "Still came!" Duncan swung blind and hit nothing. The twins changed sides immediately, using his bad eye and old thigh against him. Bowen stepped into the gap and took another cut meant for Duncan. Bowen backed toward him while counting each enemy step aloud. 3 left, Bowen warned. The twins laughed and split around them. 2, Bowen counted. Duncan lifted his axe with both hands. 1, Bowen finished. He lunged, caught the nearest twin around the chest, and locked both arms beneath his shoulders. He held the man directly under Duncan's falling axe. The second twin saw it. He shoved his brother away. Duncan's blade came down on the twin who had chosen to take the strike. The surviving brother landed in the dirt and turned back. His twin did not rise. Bowen collapsed beside the body with the short blade still in his shoulder. Duncan dropped to one knee, blood covering half his face. The surviving twin made one broken sound and forgot the rest of the battlefield. The victory went silent. Their enemy had saved his brother the same way my people kept saving one another. Back at the center, Heath and I had both stopped pretending we were fresh. The ichthyosaur had bruised my ribs and torn my forearm. The wraps around that arm had already darkened. Heath's breathing had become heavier, and the knee I had kicked at the opening made one leg drag. He attacked with short, efficient cuts. I blocked with the axe head because wide swings wasted strength I no longer had. Heath tested my left side first. He saw the delay each time I turned. His blade struck there twice. The second hit opened the edge of my coat and forced me backward. I answered by hooking his obsidian blade with World Cleaver's lower edge. I pulled him offline and drove my shoulder into his chest. Heath slid 3 steps, then cut the ground with one foot and stopped. He released another short force wave from the blade. I turned World Cleaver flat and caught it, but the impact reopened my forearm wrap. Every exchange numbed my fingers more. Neither of us gained more than a step, and each step cost enough to matter. Emery shouted when Bodhi fell. The surviving twins screamed. Then the river fight went quiet. I tried to look. Heath struck the flat of World Cleaver and forced my eyes back to him. 4 disasters at once, I muttered. I should have stayed with the dinosaur. Heath almost smiled. The moment cost him. I hooked his wrist and dragged the obsidian blade down. Heath twisted free before World Cleaver reached his shoulder, but the axe cut through the hide guard over his upper arm. His first visible blood hit the dirt. 2 Iron Peak fighters saw it and lost half a step in their own matchups. Heath saw them looking. Eyes on your enemies, he barked. They obeyed. Even wounded, he kept his line together. Then he drove his shoulder into my chest and sent me across the dirt. Public God. Private regret. The running gag remained undefeated. I rose before he could see how badly my knees shook. Heath raised his blade again. Your people fight well. If you fall, I will spare the smaller tribe and take only the border. Generous, I answered. You only want the land, the captives, and everyone who resists. His face hardened. We collided again. World Cleaver knocked the obsidian blade aside, but my injured arm nearly failed on the recovery. Heath cut across the wraps. The binding split halfway through and fresh pain shot to my shoulder. I had one meaningful strike left. Heath looked nearly as empty. That made the next interruption dangerous. A thin Iron Peak servant ran from the torchline carrying a clay bowl of red leaves and a burning branch. He dropped beside Heath. The witch ordered you to burn these. Breathe the smoke and finish him. The leaves smelled sharp even before they touched flame. I remembered the smoke that had turned Brackwater survivors into animals. I attacked before the servant could light them. Heath met World Cleaver, redirected the blade, then cut the burning branch in half himself. The flame died in the dirt. He kicked the bowl away. Red leaves scattered across the slope. The servant stared at him. You will be punished. Heath kept his weapon between us. I challenged him with equal bodies. I'll finish with my own strength. If the witch dislikes that, she can tell me herself. The red leaves stayed scattered in the dirt. The servant crawled back from both of us. Heath lowered his stance. I tightened one hand around World Cleaver. My other hand had gone numb. Around us, the ridge had become a field of wounded fighters and broken traps. Nobody had enough strength left to rescue either king. Heath spoke first. One strike. I nodded. He charged. I stepped into the attack and opened World Cleaver's power only as far as my body could survive. Our weapons collided. The impact threw dirt, shattered stone, and opened a crater beneath us. For several seconds, dust covered everything. When it cleared, Heath lay at the bottom of the crater. His obsidian blade remained in his hand. His arm would not lift it. I stood above him for one extra breath. I was the only chief still standing. The border was ours. The Iron Peak fighters looked at Heath. Then they looked across the ridge. South of the crater, Emery stood over the bound Bodhi with one hand pressed to her old wound. Nola had already turned her bow toward the torchline. Above them, Bowen and Duncan remained on their knees beside the fallen twin, but both still held weapons. Colby moved through the safe lanes, dragging our wounded away from the pits. Near the river, Garrick and Axel lay within arm's reach of each other. Neither could rise. Marina had not surfaced. The Iron Peak warriors had chances to continue. They also had no leader standing and no easy opponent left. None of them advanced. The rookie tribe had held its land. Then the bindings around my injured arm snapped completely. Pain ran through my chest and legs. World Cleaver fell from my hand. Nola reached the crater first and caught me beneath both arms. I forced the orders out before my voice disappeared. Get Marina out of the river. Bind the wounded, including Iron Peak. No pursuit. Nola tightened her hold. And you? Tell Tamsin she has command of the battlefield and the tribe. Every order goes through her until I wake. Nola's grip tightened when she heard the last word. She shouted the command to Colby. He ran for the settlement signal while Emery and the remaining fighters closed around the wounded. An Iron Peak warrior reached for Heath, and Nola let him. The battle was over. Chasing broken people into darkness would only feed the traps with both sides. Nola repeated Tamsin's name to every fighter still standing. They obeyed before I lost consciousness. The western ridge tilted beneath me. The last thing I saw was Heath still breathing in the crater while our fighters lowered their weapons around him. Then, I blacked out. Several days after the western battle, I woke inside the largest house with Tamsin sitting beside my bed. The tribe had held the border. Heath was alive. Marina had been pulled from the river. Every member of my border team survived the fight, though none came home clean. I had missed the entire aftermath. Tamsin had commanded it. Outside the house, Sunshore slingers watched the western path beside Brackwater spear fighters. Tucker's builders repaired the damaged traps while one guard called the noon watch in Tamsin's name. She had moved our injured home and separated Iron Peak's wounded from ours. Then she doubled the western watch and stopped Garrick from crawling back toward Axel for one last argument. My queen had carried the tribe while its king was unconscious again. When I asked whether Iron Peak had attacked during my coma, Tamsin pressed me back onto the bedding. No! Their wounded left after Heath fell. Ours stayed because I ordered them to. Outside, both factions changed watch when her guard called. Nobody waited for me to confirm it. This was becoming a terrible habit. Tamsin had loosened the upper strap of her hide wrap while changing my bandages. Her hair hung over one shoulder, and she looked far too pleased with my sudden interest in the ceiling, so I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. Her finger touched the pulse in my neck. Your heartbeat changed, Tamsin murmured. Sleep more convincingly. I kept my eyes shut. Battle trauma. You answered me. Minor tactical error. Tamsin leaned close enough that her hair brushed my chest. The Great King defeated Heath, then spent 3 days helpless in my bed. Should I test how much strength has returned? I opened one eye. You're enjoying this power imbalance. Very much. She kissed me slowly, then pulled back before I could forget every injury the battle had given me. The rival queen who once tested me with a whip was now my partner and co-ruler. She was also openly claiming my recovery bed. Emery still wanted my children. Nola still flirted whenever Tamsin looked away. Tamsin had no intention of letting either woman win quietly. The baby problem was no longer theoretical. It had officially become a daily survival problem. Then the frontier system appeared inside my vision. Private partner challenge. Complete 7 rounds before sunrise. Failure penalty. Strength and stamina reduced to minimum for 7 days. I stared at the message. 7 rounds before sunrise. My ribs hurt when I breathed too deeply, and Tamsin was looking at me like the number sounded conservative. The system had watched me nearly die in a territorial war and decided my recovery needed a side quest. I did what any responsible king would do. I ignored it. No response received. Challenge accepted. Silence counted as acceptance to the frontier system now. Excellent. Very normal feature. Tamsin saw my expression. What did your private miracle just tell you? Nothing helpful. She traced one finger down the edge of my bandage. Then focus on me. I looked toward the doorway and prayed for an emergency. Brambles smashed through the wall. Wood split beside the bed. The The giant bear shoved her head into the room, caught my blanket and coat together, and dragged me off the bedding. Tamsin grabbed my ankle. I caught the bed frame. The frame cracked. Bramble pulled harder and dragged the entire sleeping mat halfway through the wall. "Rylan, tell your bear to stop," Tamsin snapped. I answered, she has never respected my chain of command. For one ridiculous second, the queen and the bear pulled in opposite directions. I reconsidered every leadership decision that had brought me here. Bramble won. She hauled me through the broken wall, lifted me across her back, and ran toward the northern forest. Tamsin stood in the wrecked house with my blanket in one hand and her whip in the other. "Bring him back!" she shouted. Bramble ran faster. The bear carried me for most of the morning before turning into a rocky forest cave. Two small shapes rushed from the darkness. Bramble lowered herself and made a deep sound I had never heard from her. Both cubs answered immediately. The giant bear who had frightened our gate guards rolled onto one side so they could climb over her. The cubs made the wall-smashing trip clear. Bramble had not come to steal me from Rookie. She had come to show me the family she wanted protected there. One cub had brown fur and climbed Bramble's front leg. The other had red fur and attacked my boot with the confidence of a creature that weighed almost nothing. Bramble's romantic crisis kidnapping had become a family introduction. The brown cub climbed into my lap before my ribs approved. I named him Pip. Its red sibling bit the edge of my coat and refused to release it. I named him Rusty. Both names were basic and easy to yell while running from danger. Perfect. The frontier system marked both cubs as recruitable beast allies. When Bramble led them from the cave and they followed us toward Rookie territory, the recruitment completed. Pip kept falling behind to attack roots. Rusty kept grabbing my coat. Bramble solved both problems by nudging one forward and carrying the other by the scruff. I had gained a bear family and immediately become the least useful parent on the trail. A settlement rating appeared. Total settlement value, 98. The human population stayed unchanged. The system counted trained people, useful workers, and allied beasts together when measuring military value. Then it raised the mission scale. Civilization mission, control 10 square kilometers and grow the Rookie tribe beyond 300 people within 6 months. I had needed 18 days to turn 15 people into more than 50. Now the system wanted a regional settlement, 6 times the population, and territory large enough to contain several clans. Bramble nudged Pip away from a thorn bush. Rusty tried climbing Worldcleaver's handle. The bear family had arrived with an expansion bill. 300 people meant I needed land and recruits before Iron Peak chose the next battlefield. So once my ribs let me ride, I would scout the settlement holding Marina's people. When we reached the Rookie gate, the guards lowered their spears for Bramble this time. The cubs walked through beneath her body while children followed at a safe distance. Tamsin waited beside the broken house repair crew. She looked at Pip, then Rusty, then me. "You left my bed and returned with 2 children, she said. I lifted both hands. Bramble's children. Important distinction. Emery crouched beside Pip and let him sniff her hand. A child nearby covered a laugh. Tamsin caught the front of my coat. "You still owe me a wall," I told her. "Charge Bramble." She started it. Bramble sat down and ignored both of us. The queen's argument had met its natural predator. Over the next several days, my body recovered enough to ride. The tribe had already shown me who could carry each burden, so I made it official. Colby, my 19-year-old scout, took the cubs and hyenas. Tucker held the western defenses. Nola controlled grain and food. Garrick prepared the deep water rescue while Marina recovered. Tamsin held final command. Once my ribs let me ride, I planned to inspect Iron Peak's settlement and find Marina's captives before moving our people. Nola stepped forward when I announced the scout trip. "Let me go instead. You just woke up." Tamsin folded her arms. The woman who once started undressing in his recovery hut suddenly wants to protect his health. Nola smiled. "You remember that scene with impressive detail. Threats are memorable," Tamsin answered. I stood between them with Bramble waiting outside. I was present for the original misunderstanding, and this version feels less safe. Nola offered to take my route and report back. I refused. Heath and the border guards knew my face and Worldcleaver. I needed to see the prisoners myself. Tamsin tightened the straps on my coat herself. "Report what you find," she ordered. "Do not disappear for days. Do not bring home another wife." I glanced at Bramble. "Bears remain allowed?" Tamsin pulled the last strap hard enough to answer. "I rode Bramble toward Iron Peak alone." Halfway through the western forest, Bramble stopped and looked behind us. 2 Rookie scouts hid badly among the trees. I raised my voice. "Tell Tamsin her secret followers need quieter feet." Neither scout answered. They kept following at a distance. I took the surveillance as jealousy. At least Tamsin had sent backup. By the next day, Bramble reached the lower cliff beneath the Iron Peak settlement. Smoke rose from stone shelters above us. Narrow paths cut through the rock, and prisoners moved between them under guard. Bramble's claws scraped the first incline. The 2 scouts stopped farther back where the trees ended. I went forward alone because an armed group would have looked like an invasion before I learned anything. Guards appeared above the path with obsidian spearheads. They saw the bear, saw World Cleaver, and still blocked the entrance. "Take me to Heath Ashen," I told them. One guard laughed. "Heath commands nobody. Leave before our chief sends your skin downhill." I had crossed a lake with a Tyrannosaurus, drowned inside an ichthyosaur's mouth, and beaten Heath in a crater. Getting denied at the door felt disrespectfully ordinary. I moved one hand toward World Cleaver. The guards lowered their obsidian points. Bramble rose behind me and the nearest man lost his laugh. I could have forced the first line. The settlement above held unknown numbers, Marina's people, and whatever power the red leaves served. Starting blind would have been Garrick-level decision-making. Then chains rattled beyond the guards. Prisoners hauled stone along the cliff base. Iron collars connected them in one line. Heath walked among them. His hair was cut short. His old weapon was gone. Heavy chains held both wrists. The man who had challenged me with equal bodies now carried rock beneath guards half his strength. Axel Pace limped behind him in the same chains. The fast enforcer who nearly killed Garrick kept his eyes on the ground. I forgot the guard's insult. "What happened to your chief?" I demanded. The nearest guard looked pleased to explain it. "The witch grants power to Iron Peak's leaders. A chief who loses is stripped of that power and made a slave. Heath lost to you." My victory had delivered Heath to the person above him. Heath looked up and recognized me. His eyes widened, then his jaw set. He pulled once against the chain. A guard struck the links with a spear shaft and forced him back into line. Axel lifted his head beside Heath. He looked thinner, but the hatred remained. Neither man asked me for help. The chains said enough. One lower guard shouted toward the ledge, "The Rookie King is at the lower path!" A broad man stepped onto the ledge above us. Every Iron Peak guard lowered his head. "So this is the Rookie King," the man called down. The guards called him Zane Grimm, their new leader. One of them whispered that Zane was stronger than Heath. I shouted, "Come down and speak to me." Zane looked at Bramble, then at World Cleaver. He stayed on the cliff. "You beat the failed chief," Zane answered. "That earned you nothing here." He lifted one hand and pointed down. Harpoon fighters sprinted off the cliff path toward me.